I'd like to call the May 3rd meeting of the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors. I read second and said third. Okay, now I'd like to call the May 2nd meeting of Gloucester County Board of Supervisors to order. Ms. Steele, will you call the roll?
Mr. Gibson?
Here.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith?
Here.
Mr. Hutson?
Here.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Here.
Mr. Hedrick?
Here.
Mr. Bazzani?
Here.
All present.
Would you join me in the invocation of Pledge of Allegiance by Reverend McKibben, New Freedom Worship Center?
Mr. Chairman and board members and Ms. Steele and Mr. Wilmot, thank you so much for allowing me this privilege of praying. So let's pray. Hallelujah. Lord, we pray for this important meeting tonight and for the decisions that will be made rightly and effectively to govern Gloucester County. Bless our supervisors and county employees with your wisdom and your understanding as they conduct the business and affairs of our county and as they guide us into the future. Thank you for their service and their dedication. Thank you for making this meeting place in every county office building and every courtroom and every school safe and free from danger. Thank you for all of our law enforcement officers who ensure our safety and keep the peace. Bless and protect them, we pray. We give thanks for our democratic republic and for the unique freedoms that we have as a nation. Help us to preserve those freedoms by electing the right people to office and putting an end to corruption where it's found. We pray for justice to always prevail in our county and in our nation. We pray for restoration of trust and integrity to the institutions that failed us during the recent pandemic, and we are thankful for those who told us the truth. We pray for protection from the influence of giant monopolies that hide the truth and shape public opinion and sway elections. Protect us from the foreign and domestic enemies and from the specter of World War III. We pray for peace, for racial harmony and brotherly love and mutual respect to prevail in our nation and in this county. We pray for return to traditional values. We pray for able-bodied people to return to the workforce and for our businesses to thrive. Lastly, we pray for spiritual renewal and for the positive changes that revivals of the past have had on our society. The Lord has the cure for the ills of every society. Lord, heal our land, we pray, in Jesus' name. Amen. Let's pray the Pledge of Allegiance
To the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Reverend.
Okay, now we'll move to approval of the minutes for February 3rd and February 7th.
So moved.
All in favor? Aye. Before we move to the adoption of the agenda, I'm going to make some changes. We have item 11D, which is discussion and decision on Woods Crossroads Smart Scale funding. I'm going to move that after the citizen comment period before the public hearing. Sarah,
I'll make that motion to amend the agenda as presented.
all in favor? Aye. Make a motion to approve the consent agenda.
So moved. Second.
All in favor? Aye. Matters presented by the board. Okay. We'll move to county administrator items.
Two very good items to share with you, and there'll be more information coming out in some press releases, but I wanted to let you know that our tourism department won a state award for their regional marketing plan, and even better than that, our visitor center won the visitor center of the year. So that was really good, especially when we were under construction. Yes, yes. Thank you, and that's it.
Okay. Now we'll move to scheduled presentations. It's the third quarter financial review. Ms. Spivey.
Good evening. distributed earlier this week was the full set of third quarter financial statements. On my presentation, I'm going to focus on the general fund and where I expect the general fund to end the fiscal year. Any questions you may have on anything I present, as well as anything that's in those financial statements, I'll be happy to discuss. So for the third quarter in the general fund, so that's 9 months of actual revenues received and expenditures and transfers out. We are at 61% of our revenues and 70% of our expenditures. 61% is reflective of we get the largest, we get, you know, ad valorem taxes, property taxes are our largest revenue, and we receive half of those the last day of this year. So that's always going. We're always going to be in the situation where we're dipping into fund balance here in the third quarter. So, and that is what this is showing. We budgeted a use of fund balance of $3.5 million. Right now, with the revenues being less than expenditures, we're at a negative $9.5 million. Again, majority of our half of our revenues from our largest revenue source comes in the fourth quarter. So this compares to revenues last year were 63% of the budget, and at this time, and for the third quarter expenditures were at 71% of the budget. So you can see we're pretty close. We're tracking very close to where we were last year. This next slide are our largest revenue sources, and I'm going to focus primarily on revenues because I think that's where we have the most opportunity to either come in a little bit higher than we expected or not. And there's one revenue that we budgeted it as well as we could. It's personal property tax, based on what we believe would produce a net zero increase from last year because of at that time used car prices and values were much higher, so we normalized the rate to come in at what we thought would be a net zero. We because the second half of that is based on this year's values and this year's rate, which we did adjust back. We had the temporary adjustment down, but we adjusted back. We really don't know what those personal property taxes are going to come in at. The values are still undetermined. But otherwise, I'm going to go through some of these. Based on my projections, I'm projecting that real estate tax will come in at around right at 100%. We budgeted for a net zero. That's kind of what I'm expecting there. For personal property taxes, right now you're seeing they're at 60%, but the second payment should be significantly less than that, because that again was even though it was the lower rate, it was the higher values. Local sales tax, there's 8 months of local sales tax, so you can see with I have a little cheat sheet on the side, 8 months of revenues, if they were received equally, would be about 67%, and you can see that the local sales tax is at 69% of budget, so slightly higher. Mills tax, that's where we're seeing some good growth in our mills tax. The sheriff, state shared revenues that come to the sheriff, those are down this year. That is 72% of our budget, And, well, actually, the actual revenues came in higher, but we budgeted a higher amount because of the trends we had been seeing last year. The auto relief funds, the auto tax relief funds that we receive from the state, we receive the same amount every year, and we get those in the same, in the same quarters. So we've gotten everything except for one last payment that comes in the fourth quarter for $138,000. Business license tax, we should have received most of that at this point, and as you can tell, it is higher than we had budgeted it to be. Communication sales tax, that one is probably will not come in at budget. As of now, it's 64% of budget with 8 months of revenue in. The Public Service Corporation, another one of our larger revenues, is right on target. The consumer utility tax on target. And then one of the ones that we're seeing the lowest amount of revenue that compared to the prior few years is the recordation tax. So with that, 61% of revenues have been received compared to 64% of last year's budget. Yes, sir.
Ms. Spivey, I was looking at the communication sales tax. Your budget is 1.1 or 1.1 million, but you've got 64% basically progress, right? So if I were to calculate that, if you take your 1.1 and divide by 64%, you're coming in at around 1.7 million. You're saying we're going to come under that? You take your progress divided into your.
Well, so we've received 8 months of revenue, which should be around 67%, and we've received 64%.
And so, but the remaining balance is the total balance is 1.17, right? 1.117.
That's what we budgeted.
Yeah. So if you divide that by 0.64, you come in somewhere around 1.7 million instead of what you're projecting there. That's your progress, right?
I think if you took the
all the rest kind of line up. They line up.
Well, first of all, I want to point out too that we have been lowering that because this is a lot of the cable fees and things like that, and people are not doing as much as they were. But if you take that 716, and if that was 64%, and so I think that's what you're wanting to divide, and then so.
Right now, we're projected to come in about $40,000 less than what was budgeted.
From the year-to-date receipts.
Yes.
Okay.
Not too bad off,
Not
but
too
we're
bad.
going to probably have to keep lowering that
The
every
rest of them
year.
kind of lined up. So this one kind of. Okay.
Right.
I'm good.
And if I can, Mr. Chairman, Ms. Spivey, I believe the reason that the recordation, again, is down is because those were state law changes. And they tried to get them reversed, if I remember correctly, and then that did not happen. So it's like the state's not giving us the amount that we used to get.
Okay. I think that sounds right. So then I thought we would look at the revenues that have the most significant changes. Starting with the good news as far as revenue goes is we are earning money on our deposits now. That has not been the case in years. So we have with the upside of interest rates increasing is that we have investment earnings. Business license tax, is about 10% higher, more than 10% higher than we expected. So good news there. We already talked about local sales tax is up, mills tax is up. Another one, and I don't know what with what's going on in the banking industry will do now, but you can see we've had $93,000 received more than we expected. So then we look at the 4 that are less, significantly less, coming in significantly less than what's budgeted. the state shared revenues that I've already talked about, the recordation tax. And then we have two that you're aware that we don't have the SROs in place, therefore we don't have the reimbursement. We don't have revenues from the SRO grant. Now that is a net zero because we don't have expenditures either. But if strictly looking at revenue, that's part of the decrease. And then with our solar inspections, these are based on how many inspections are done and the expenditures incurred. And we've had significantly less than what were budgeted last year. Again, it affects what you're seeing on the revenue side, but it's also those expenditures are not being incurred.
Dr. Orth.
Now, when you said solar inspections, I know we're taking we're doing that and then we get reimbursed, correct?
That's right. So the way it's budgeted
Right.
is
We pay out and then we put
the
a bill.
amount that is expected for
So it's
those
gonna balance
inspections
out.
to cost,
Right.
which we're which the owner is paying us,
Right.
is on the expenditure side, and the reimbursements on. So that's just a budget,
Right.
a budget thing. So looking at all those, and I've now rolled these up into the functional areas categories. I think our revenues will come in maybe 1.4 million above what we have budgeted, and that would be a 2% increase over budget. Expenditures, there's not much to talk about expenditures. Based on my projections, most of the departments will come in very close to 100% of their budget. They can't be more. So, but it looks to me that we will be very close to 100% in most. Public Works, which is engineering, facilities management, and also the landfill. At this point, it appears that will end with some savings. In education, I left the $700,000 as being unspent because right now that you as a board chose to put that in contingency, so we have not appropriated that to the schools. That's the difference between the amount that's budgeted and the amount that's appropriated, and it is sitting in contingency at this point. So I've left it there in my projections. Parks and Recreation, again, it appears that they may not spend the full amount of their budget. Social Services and Children's Services, these are funds that are separate from the general fund, but the general fund pays a certain portion of their expenditures, and these amounts are based on the county's portion of what gets spent. Based on the trends right now, I'm estimating that both of those will come in under budget. So overall, I'm projecting that 99% of the expenditure budget will be spent. So that gives us savings of $1,038,000. Yes.
Ms. Bobby, I just want to clarify, because we do expect and we project for transfer savings. So the 191 and the 87 for Social Services, or Children's Service Act, and the, and Social Services, is that making up our projected savings, or is this in addition to? That is part of that savings projected, right?
So the transfer savings that's showing on the last line is the negative. So that's being offset. So it appears, I'm projecting that we'll have slightly less than the amount that we have budgeted for savings.
Okay.
The vacancy savings, they show up in the contingencies and pay matters. And so I haven't spread that to the departments, but you can see that the departments that have staff, it appears that there'll be enough savings within those departments to cover our vacancy savings.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes, Ms. Spivey. I want to make sure I understand this transfer to social services and the Children's Services Act. Are we saying that we anticipate they will need less than they did that we budgeted for?
That's what we're saying.
Okay.
And that is not unusual.
Okay.
It has been the norm that they don't spend their full budget, which means that we don't have we only transfer them the county's portion of what they spend. So, and that has been the trend, which is why we budget transfer savings, just like we budget salary savings. So based on the revenues and expenditures, again, in our budget as it stands now, we are budgeted to spend $3.5 million of our fund balance. Most of that amount that I'm projecting that we will spend is in the committed funds. So these funds were already committed for the purpose in which they're being spent. And if you're looking at the projection column of the 1.3 million committed, I'm projecting that almost all of that will be spent. And yes. So the last column is showing what we overall I'm projecting that we will spend in fund balance. I'm expecting that the restricted amounts will be spent, that the committed amounts, the amounts that we budgeted will be spent, and that because the way the math works, it shows that instead of using $3.5 million or using $1.9 million of unassigned fund balances, which is what we focus on, we should add back possibly $400,000. So we should end the unassigned fund balance. I'm projecting we'll end pretty much where it was last year.
Any more questions for Ms. Spivey? Dr. Orth.
With regard to the 1% sales tax, are we pretty much on target with the projections we need for the schools?
For the schools, we continue to be above target on
good.
that.
That's good.
Okay. Well, I wanted to thank you as the board for allowing me to enjoy your paradise of Gloucester County, and it's bitter. It's always bittersweet when I leave somewhere. But in addition to making what I believe is a good move for me and my family, there's a young group in finance, in both sides of finance, that are ready for the challenge, and I'm so excited that they have the opportunity to do that. And again, I thank you for these 3 years. And Gloucester has been good to me, and has been good for me, and I have great fond memories that I'll take with me.
Thank you. Okay. The next item on the agenda is citizen comment period.
Mr. Chair, if I may,
Yes,
there's a lot of people here, obviously.
yes.
And I think many of them may be here for the R-cut at Woods Crossroad. I'm guessing, and I could be wrong. I'm good at guessing. And I saw a Facebook post that said that were you to approve the R-cut and were VDOT to pursue it, it would necessarily mean the closing of the store, which in my understanding is not true. That you could approve the R-cut, you could, I'm not saying I'm in favor of it because I'm not, but if you were to approve it, it would not mean the closing of the store. So as a precursor to these people, these wonderful people talking, I would want it to be made clear that an R-cut does not mean the store is closing. That's all I have to say. Thank you.
Okay, before we get to the citizen comment period, thanks, Ms. Wilmot. I was going to ask Mr. McKnight to come up and speak about specifics in regard to the R-cut.
Yes, thank you for the opportunity to do that, and you're absolutely right, Mr. Wilmot. The Dutton Store access management impacts have been removed from the conceptual plan, in large part to the citizen information meeting that we had a few months ago. It will focus solely on the intersection for safety purposes. I did want to also mention that funding has not been awarded. It will be voted on in June by the CTB. It was rated the 6th rated project in the entire state, but I just did want to make that distinction. VDOT has requested that if awarded those funds, that funding be accelerated, and there is support for that from the CTB. So I did want to mention that as well. I know that was a concern of the board, just the time frame of that project. And I did want to reiterate that a signal is still not warranted at the intersection at this time.
Okay. Now, how many of you plan on speaking tonight, if you would raise your hands? Okay, we're going to change this around a little bit. We're going to make everybody move a little bit. I'm going to start with the wall. If you would come up in order, if you want to speak, speak. You're going to have 3 minutes to speak, and then we're going to go row by row to make it easier for everybody in this, because everybody wants to speak, and we're not going to limit anybody's ability to speak tonight, but that way it might be the most orderly fashion. So whoever would like to start on the front row, come on up and just start coming on up forward.
Yes, I lived at Woods Crossroads for
Could you,
approximately 20
Let me
years.
interrupt you 1 second.
Yes, sir.
If you could all state your name and magisterial district.
James Deal. I live in Carter's Cove, but I lived at Woods Crossroads for 20-some years.
Abingdon District.
Okay, Abingdon?
Yes.
Okay.
Please.
Go ahead.
Please.
I lived at Sign Pine for actually 20-some years with my stepfather behind the old sawmill a long time ago. I don't know what the issue is, why all the people have wrecks at that intersection when you can see a quarter of a mile or a half a mile down the road. I think that people just get confused on which way to turn or which side of the line they need to be on. I don't think moving the store for a second time, because actually it's been moved once before, and when I was younger, when they put the extra lane on the Route 17. And now you go corrupt another place of business that's in the county. And to me, you should put a stoplight up there, either get people off their cell phones and get them to drive right. You know, I don't see how moving something or taking somebody's property will actually fix anything. You know, a stop sign to me, stoplights to me, whether it's budgeted or not, it should be put there. You know, don't take somebody's property. You know, that's wrong. That's, you know, people in the United States are here, you know, because it's a free country. You don't go taking people's property.
Thank you, Mr. Deal.
Yes, sir.
My name's Ricky Hall, Abingdon District. I ain't gonna say much more to waste y'all's time, this gentleman just said. I will say this, to do anything to Miss Adelaide, as much as she does for all the people of this county, that would be a travesty in itself. That woman has got a heart of gold, and there ain't nobody that she wouldn't do anything for within her means. That's all I got to say.
Thank you.
Good evening, magistrates. Chuck Thompson, Gloucester Point District. I'm going to change things up a little bit. I'm just going to bring to your attention, there's a county ordinance, animal control, 3-30. It has a state code equivalent, 3.2-6524. Now, a county ordinance is supposed to mirror a state code. There are times when you can actually, a locality can take a state code and actually make it stronger. But in the case of 3-30, the wording in there is stronger than what the state code is or allows. And I'll point that out. 3.2-6524 specifically states that it shall be illegal to own a dog 4 months old or older without a license. Now, the county code says it shall be illegal to own or have a dog in custody, a dog that's 4 months old or older, without a license. So basically, what the county code is a Dillon rule violation because of the excess wording. So I just wanted to point that out, let you know, it needs to be fixed. All right, that's it. Thank you. Appreciate your time.
Thank you, Mr. Thompson. Guys or individuals, if you're going to speak, if you could just start heading up, it would be great. And I know, Mr. Orga, you said you wanted to speak earlier. This is about all citizen comment, just not Woods Crossroads.
Good evening, gentlemen and ladies. My name is Joshua Walker, Gloucester District. On behalf of Adelaide's store and the R-Cut, I guess my biggest concern would be for Mr. McKnight and the rest of the community. How am I supposed to enter a highway where the speed limit is 65, get into a left lane where traffic that's already doing 70, just so I can turn? Furthermore, the R-Cut would just expand the accidents in 2 different directions by a quarter mile. So, like what the first gentleman said, people are just being reckless and not paying attention. You can see over a half a mile in both directions. I would personally rather see a stoplight go up than an R-Cut. That way, at least people have to stop and then make a conscious left turn. Now, I know VDOT already tried to put stop signs in both directions. Clearly, that hasn't worked when they just blow through the intersection because they're not paying attention. This hasn't nothing to do with the fact that traffic is too bad or you can't see it. It's just people not paying attention. Put up the stoplight. Have them put up a stoplight. Furthermore, trying, like I said at the beginning, I have to get into the left lane with traffic doing 70 just so I can make a turn. You're consciously just putting it out there that I'm going to get in a greater chance of getting in that accident. From a 0 mile an hour to 70 in less than a quarter mile. That makes no sense. 0 cents. That's all I gotta say.
Thank you, Mr. Walker.
Good evening, members of the board and my community. I'm Adelaide Slaymaker. I'm a member of Petsworth District, and I'm the one that everybody's concerned about, thank God. Irregardless of what you all are doing to my business, that has been projected that tonight you say you're not going to do. My community, I'm speaking for 95% of them, do not want an R-turn. It's time that this board and the people in this county listen to the fact that we, the citizens, don't want it. We feel that the R-Cut is going to propose 2 points of accidents instead of 1. And it is also going to reduce our rescue time by about 5 minutes, which in our end of the county is already detrimental. I would like to see this board recommend that we table this R-Cut project until we meet the criteria, whatever for reason that we're not meeting it now, to get a red light. That is what we would like to have, and we as the people have a right to have what we want. It's our taxpayers' money that's paying for it, and irregardless of whether it's gas taxes or tax money, it still comes from us. So I am asking you all to please vote to table this R-Cut process until we meet the criteria that VDOT has made for a red light. Thank you.
Good morning, good afternoon, members of the board. Chad Whitmore, Abingdon District. On regards to the R-Cut, I think it's a bad idea due to the accident situation, but also the memories that are made that is at that store and the property behind it. Growing up here in Gloucester and Matthews, I went to 2 stores. I went to Island Stop at Matthews, and I went to Dutton's Market. Adelaide, I knew her father when I was younger, near baby. But the memories of going there with my mom and having breakfast, going there with my children now to go buy a 25-cent lollipop. I can't take them into 7-Eleven and do that. This is the only store that I can do this. There's only 3 around here. When the board considers ideas like this, you need to think about the memories of my grandfather, my father, my mother, and now me. The memories that were passed down from them, I'm going to share with my children. When you take stuff away from us like that, we don't understand it. You're taking away more of a memory and a deep love that we have for our community, and you just want to destroy it with something nasty. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, members of the board. My name is Jason Frazier, Petsworth District. I don't know if anybody else has brought this up, but it's not only going to be 2 extra places that it's going to be accidents happen. It's going to be 3, because you're still going to have traffic flowing through the R-Cut. And if they're not looking now, they're not going to look then. So you've got 3 places to have bad accidents. If we can't afford it and we don't meet the criteria for it, please table it, set it aside, save our money until we meet the criteria. If we spend money putting an R-Cut there, and then, let's say 5 years from now, we got to tear it all up and put a traffic light because it's not working, we've thrown money away. I can't throw money away, and I'm asking you not to throw our tax dollars away. We're already being taxed when we buy something, taxed when we sell something, taxed when to own something. You know, if you're going to spend it, use it wisely. And don't get, don't waste our money. That's the only thing I'm saying. So, thank you.
Stacy Carpenter, Petsworth District. We're a neighbor of Dutton's. Known Addie quite a while. And you're going to hear from everybody in here the love they have for her, that store, the memories. My children have grown up. My son even got his first job there. If we put all that aside, and we look at this R-Cut versus a stoplight, I have to think about my mother and my children. You should think about your family members that drive down there, all the accidents, loss of lives that have happened. And like everyone said, this is going to divide that. And it's going to make 2 spots for people to get hurt and die. You have to come off of Davenport Road, turn right, merge up to 60, 70 miles an hour, get over to the left, slow down in a very short lane, stop to make a U-turn, and then you have to try to get back out on 17 in the same dang traffic that's causing the accidents down at the other intersection. It's just creating a bigger problem. It is innovative. It is a great idea, but not here. It doesn't work here. I want to know why a stoplight's not warranted. Where's your data for that? Where's the criteria? Sorry. I've never done this. I'm sorry. Okay. I want to know where the data is. It says we don't meet the criteria for a stoplight. Hmm? I know, that's fine. Okay. I'm sorry. I've never done this before. So if you could put that out, I don't know where it's available for us to see. We can see all about the R cut. But that doesn't figure in life, humanity, the ages of the people driving the community up there, our children. So I would just like for you guys to consider that, because most of us here know someone who's either been hurt or killed up there. And when you multiply the amount of times that can happen, that's really a bad thing. And then on the top of putting the construction right to Adelaide's door, I'm not quite sure how that's gonna not affect her business. And the business is on that whole intersection. And I hope I said that okay.
Thank you.
Just real quick, my name's Ken Hallowell. I live about 6 houses down from that market. I can tell you that most of these people that live up there with me pull a trailer. I'm gonna shoot across 2 lanes of traffic, stop, make a U-turn, go 70 miles an hour without getting creamed. I just lost a horse trailer and a truck in West Point at a stop sign, rear-ended, totaled both of them. A 3-horse slant trailer just 2 weeks ago on Saturday, and a truck, an F-250, and they totaled both of them. They totaled both of them at a stoplight. You don't think that that's gonna happen there? I'm gonna try to shoot across 2 lanes of traffic, get in that turn lane that's 1,600 yards down according to that useless meeting we had 2 months ago, which was totally pointless at Petsworth. I'm gonna shoot across 2 lanes of traffic, get in a U-turn lane, make a U-turn with a horse trailer, and go 70 miles an hour without getting rear-ended. Anybody else got a problem with that one? I just lost a trailer and a truck. I just lost a trailer and a truck 2 weeks ago, and I was at a stop sign, or stoplight, pardon me, a stoplight. It's not gonna work. We all pull trailers, horses, farm equipment, lawnmower equipment. We're not gonna be able to get across 2 lanes of traffic, get into that turn lane, make that turn, because I can tell you that kid with that $2 muffler and that little bitty car, he's gonna stack right here next to me. He's not going to be able to see because I'm blocking him and I'm pulling a trailer. He's not going to be able to see. He's going to... Like I said, my name's Ken Hallowell. I live 6 houses down from that store. It's not going to work, ladies and gentlemen. It's not going to work.
Good evening, Board. Mrs. Steele. My name is Becky Hall. I also live in Petsworth District, Woods Crossroads. I also was born and raised there. I have lived other places most of my life. This is one of the worst ideas I've ever seen. I have driven across country, and this is absolutely one of the worst ideas. They keep comparing the R-cut to the food line in Saluda. The food line in Saluda does not have neighborhoods from both sides of 17 coming out, with traffic doing 80 miles an hour. Can't tell you how many times I've almost been rear-ended trying to get off of 17 because the deceleration lanes are too short. I have written to VDOT many, many times with no response. When we had the meeting at Petsworth School, I was handed a card, please contact me. I did. The response was, I forwarded it to Saluda. Their minds are made up. They're not listening to us. The residents of Woods Crossroads do not want the R-cut. We want a light. They have worked on the intersection. All they did was shave down the dirt, make a ditch, and put 2 stop signs up. Deceleration lanes were never addressed. They never notified anyone that they put the stop signs in the median. So the ones that were used to just zipping through are still zipping through. Maybe if we had some policing, ticketing people doubling up in the intersection and zipping through, that would help until we get the light that we request. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Hall.
Good evening. My name is Mark Hutchins, and I'm a member of the Petsworth District. Just making sure I don't start out reading my grocery list here. I'm a little nervous. Dear Board of Supervisors, we are concerned for the safety of our neighborhood, and we urge you to approve the proposed R-Cut for Route 17, Woods Crossroads, Smart Scale Project 9350. Thanks to the Middle District Planning Commission, we have received approval for a VDOT grant. This grant, which does not require Gloucester County taxpayers to match or contribute a single penny, is ours if we vote to accept it. If we vote no, we lose the money. I'd like to share some concerns that were voiced at the last public hearing at Petsworth. Number one, we are not using our taxpayer monies wisely. According to VDOT, Smart Scale is a process that helps Virginia meet its most critical transportation needs using limited tax dollars. Smart Scale is used to evaluate transportation projects using key factors like safety and accessibility. Smart Scale was literally designed to ensure our monies are spent on our most critical transportation needs. Number two, why do I have to turn right when I want to turn left? VDOT is recommending the R-Cut project to reduce the number of contact points. In other words, the R-Cut project is designed to reduce the number of chances that vehicles will run into one another. This dramatically reduces the number of accidents and the associated injuries and fatalities. Number three, school buses cannot use the intersection and U-turns. R-Cut project is designed to allow school buses, ambulances, and other large vehicles to have the room they need to use the intersection and the U-turn safely and securely. Number four, a traffic light is less costly. Yes, a traffic light is less costly, but VDOT traffic engineers and other professionals are recommending an R-Cut to improve safety and maintain the efficient flow of traffic up and down Route 17. The R-Cut greatly improves safety while allowing us to move freely. Number five, the R-Cut will close local businesses. It is my understanding that VDOT officials have assured us that no local businesses will be harmed, or they will work to mitigate or minimize any negative impact on our local businesses. In conclusion, we're all in agreement this intersection is very dangerous. VDOT has it ranked number one among all projects submitted in our district, which includes 14 counties. The intersection ranked, I thought, number 7. I heard number 6 earlier on the Smart Scale for the entire state of Virginia. Too many times we have arrived at this intersection to find emergency personnel
Mark,
on site.
Can you wrap up, please?
I can. Last sentence. Please say yes, keep the grant. Let's not lose these monies. Let's put them to work to improving our safety. And thank you for the chance to comment.
For what? You just raised your hand, that's why.
Good evening, Board. My name is Matthew Jenkins. I'm Petsworth District. I'm a retired lieutenant with the Sheriff's Office. I have more experience, schooling, training with accidents than I would be willing to say anybody in this room. And I will tell you why the R-Cut's not going to work. At the meeting we had, they were talking about how R-Cuts are for where you have problems in the median. That was what VDOT told me. They're not there to see where the accidents are happening. The accidents are happening with the people coming southbound, turning to go into Dollar General. They're getting hit by the northbound traffic. That will be 90% of your wrecks there. The R-turn is not going to stop the people traveling southbound, turning into Dollar General. And then you're making, as we say, 2 more places with the U-turns that you're going to have wrecks there. The accidents are not happening by people coming off of Davenport and going to Dollar General. It's the traffic off of 17. I can pull up pictures on my phone right now, last September. This is not the first time I've done that I've gone out there with my bush hog and cut that median because the grass was over 8 feet tall. They have now, there was a huge mound there, which made visibility bad. Then you throw 8 feet of grass on top of that, and no, you could not see the traffic coming northbound. That's where the problem was. They've cut the mound down. Give this time to see how it works. A traffic light is not going to stop wrecks either. We have wrecks at every traffic light in this county. So the traffic light is not going to help it. But the R-turn is not going to change a thing. You're still going to have the wrecks turning into Dollar General, and the 2 U-turns, quarter mile down, you're going to make 2 more places for wrecks. So instead of 1, you're going to have 3. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, Mr. Chief.
Good evening. My name's Rory Brill. I'm with Petsworth District. I wasn't planning on speaking, but I am because just hearing everybody here, I have personally seen these accidents up there. I've seen them down at the point. It's gonna happen. People don't pay attention. When those stop signs went up, I immediately saw that they went up. Called my wife, said, hey, there's stop signs there, make sure you stop now. It's not stopping anybody, but this R-cut is not gonna do that. Now my wife, when she takes my kids to school, has to go north, racing against the northbound traffic. It's already hard enough to get across there. And then make a U-turn, fight southbound traffic just to get my kids to school, making it even more dangerous. This R-cut does not work, not for that area. A light would ideally be great, but even widening a middle median would be perfect, because what happens is everybody coming southbound cuts a turn lane, tries to skip over 2 lanes of traffic that are right there in the middle, and that's what causes the accidents. I've seen it personally while I was working my job and while I'm not. And as far as the other citizen over here that said we need more policing there, trust me, ma'am, we're trying our best, okay? And I'm just like this gentleman right here. I'm employed by the county. We try. We're very short-handed. We're trying our best on it. Let it be the way it is. Let us do our job, enforce that area, and see what happens down the road. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Perry.
Hey, members of the board, my name's Dominic Ciccolini. I live off Fig Shop. I'm not sure what district that is. So if any of you guys. We'll just go with Petsworth. Sounds good. So, again, I wasn't going to talk either, but the gentleman three speeches ago kind of motivated me to come up here. He says we're wasting money by not taking it. No, sir. No, we're just not receiving free money. Okay, and you know what? We don't want it. So that's our opinion, and you guys represent our opinion. And it looks like to me we got 1 no and, I don't know, 50 yeses. So if you guys represent our opinion, I would appreciate if you guys would just take some time before you change people's lives. I mean, I don't know if any of you guys have to take that intersection every day, but yeah, I bet if you would, and you had to with a 40-foot trailer, I bet you'd probably say, we should probably look at this a little bit longer. You know, that's what a lot of these people are here for. And also, if we were in the middle of New York City, let's go R-cut. You know, let's go, man. You know, so I don't have to stop at a red light. Cool. I'm not in New York City. I'm in Gloucester County. So I'd appreciate if you guys take that into effect. And thank y'all for your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Thank you for letting me speak. I'm not a good speaker, but I've lived in Gloucester County, Woods Crossroads, for almost 60 years. I love our county. I love our little neck of the woods. I live down Woodstock Road, and when I'm able to sit on my deck and hear sirens repeatedly all through the week, the first thought that comes to my mind is there's been another accident there. I wonder, is it my family? My family lives all around us. Is it my close friends? Who is it? To keep this short and sweet, I am opposed to the R-cut. I do not think that will work. I do think that if we could meet the criteria of a traffic light, that is our solution. I don't know what we need, but I've had a lot of citizens here in Gloucester tell me that people run stoplights all the time. They're dangerous. Well, if that's the case, why do we have them all throughout the whole United States? I think one is needed. I think VDOT needs to put down whatever it is they need to work with to calculate. How long has it been since they've calculated how many people we have coming and going through there? All I know is it's extremely dangerous. I'm very worried. I'm tired of worrying about it. I'm not going nowhere. Hopefully, God willing. I do worry every time I go leave to come home. Am I going to make it through it? When I pass by Dutton's store, I think, thank God, I made it through it. And Dutton's Grocery, Bill and Countess Dutton practically fed my family. They're good people, and I support them wholeheartedly. And if this would impact her business, I'm not sure if it will or not. I am totally opposed. And I would stand up for her and our little community of Woods Crossroads, even though it's growing day by day. I will still stand up and state what I feel is a fact. We need a stoplight. Thank you for hearing me.
Ma'am, what was your name?
My name is Cindy Rummond, Petsworth District. Sorry about that. Have a good evening.
How you doing? Luke Evans, Petsworth District. I come through that intersection every day. I pull large trailers. And the idea of this R-cut, people have talked about 3 collisions points, but actually you have more because once that U-turn lane backs up, you're going to have people in the fast lane on 17 southbound and northbound. So that's another place where people can get rear-ended because people with trailers and all that are going to have to wait a long time to make those U-turns to go north or south. So I'm totally against the R-cut, and like everybody else is saying, I think we need to table it until we have the right criteria for a stoplight there. Thank you for your time.
Thank you, sir.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Tiffany Harris. I'm with Petsworth District. As a Gloucester County former employee, I was a school bus driver for 5 years. I drove elementary and high school going up and down that median every single day, making that turn with 60 to 80 children every day, 2 times a day. How many accidents did I get in? 0. Why? Because it's simple. It's you pay attention. I've lived there. I've lived up Woods Crossroads 32 years. I've had a license for 16 years. Never been in an accident at that intersection. Talking to other bus drivers that work for the county and drive up there, every single person is against that R-cut because it's going to make it harder on us. It's going to put our children's lives in danger who we're trying to protect to try to get through all that traffic like they're saying. It's hard enough as it is now. Adding any more is just going to make it even worse. When you have to slow down, when you have to turn, when you have that big load and you've got that 40-ton bus and you've got all them children on there, trying to do that and watching them children in that mirror and doing all that, that's a lot. So I'm asking you to table it, to put it to the side. If you want to put a stoplight up, sure, go for it. The R-cut, I'm not for it. I don't think it's going to help anything. I think, if anything, it's going to make it worse. And everybody needs to think long and hard about the decision, and I hope everybody listens to it because, like I said, we have your children's lives. All these people, we're toting your children up and down the roads. We're trying to get them there safely. Doing that is just going to hinder what we're trying to do. So please think about that. Thank you.
Takes me a second to get straight here.
I will wait for you.
Okay. I'm James Day, Petsworth District. Now, 2 things that scare me is that intersection and being right here. My background is combat aviator, Korea, Vietnam, 3 times hit. They didn't get me yet for good. To me, also I'm a professional engineer in a half a dozen states, and you guys would go to sleep if I told you that. Okay, so if we can get the state to agree with us and lengthen the queues for both deceleration coming in to make the turn there and the acceleration on the opposite side to go away from there, we don't need the light. We can keep the traffic moving. Everybody's saying, gee whiz, I gotta have a dragster to get out there. Let's give them a drag strip to do it in. Going up the street, turning around, coming back, you just multiplying it, as everybody else has said before, 3 times. Anytime you get these where you don't have a long queue, where people can't see to decelerate and accelerate, they're gonna have the problems. So that's my 2 cents worth. I got my stick back so nobody can throw things at me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Day.
Good evening, everybody. William Nash, Petsworth District. I'd like to bring 3 concerns this evening. One, of course, is the safety of our children with the school buses. It seems completely senseless to endanger our children's lives like this. I see so many times now the way that it is. Most of the time, it's common sense that people don't use when they come to this intersection that causes a lot of accidents. VDOT says that it won't affect Miss Adelaide's business. I've seen VDOT run 2 businesses out of the same store in Saluda in the last 3 to 4 years. G's Deli and Miss Mary's Seafood. They said the same thing, wouldn't affect their business. Both of them had to leave. Nobody here wants anything to happen to Miss Adelaide's business for the community, and that's all I'm going to say. Thank you.
Hello. My name is Nadia Lyerly, and I live in the Petsworth district. I've lived on Davenport Road for about 15 years now. Lived in Gloucester my whole life, and I've known Miss Adelaide and her family my whole entire life. I don't think that an R-turn will fix the problems with the accidents. I agree with everybody else here. It will cause more accidents, especially with the people that are pulling trailers in these school buses. I do believe that y'all should maybe think about maybe lowering that speed limit. Y'all raised it to 60 and expected people not to drive 70 on a straightaway, plus make that turn on that short little deceleration lane. Maybe those should be options until y'all can afford the stoplight. I don't think the R-turn is a good idea. So, I appreciate your time.
Thank you.
Good evening. Appreciate y'all's patience and hard work. My name is Jeff Merrill. I'm with the Petsworth District, and we live at Woods Crossroads, and we run a business called The Farmer's Daughter, and we're in big support of Dutton's Store, and small businesses up in that area are few and far between. So on a business aspect, I'm going to support Adelaide and whatever she calls for. And you know, it's a livelihood for a lot of people living in the area, and a lot of people in Gloucester who love the county and lived in the county all their lives, and it's an important thing to us all. So we're, as far as the Farmer's Daughter, we're in opposition to the R-cut, and we support Dutton's Store. So thank you very much. We appreciate it.
Good afternoon. My name's Ethan Edmonds. Forgive me, I'm not as well spoken as most. I could sit up here and beat a dead horse at what everybody's before me has said about it just being a bad idea in general. The VDOT saying that it will not impact the business. I grew up from a small town on the other side of Virginia where this very thing happened. VDOT came through, said, oh, we need to make an improvement in this intersection. We had a small general store there called Stop and Go, literally identical to Miss Adelaide's store. They came through, they widened the lanes, they put, I don't even remember what the technical name for it is. Oh, it was such a great idea. Oh, it's gonna lower accidents. it's not going to affect the business, but in fact, it did. In a matter of 2 years, the stop-and-go general store that sat there for 50-plus years was shut down because business was taken away. They took away over half their parking lot, where 18-wheelers, people hauling farm equipment, you name it, no longer turned into this store, which was their main source of business. So VDOT's opinion on that is worth about a hill of beans. Not very much. It's not a good idea. I've lived in Virginia. I'm 31-year-old, lived in Virginia most of my life, except for the 10 I was stationed in Florida. I don't take their word for very much, to say the least. It's not a good idea. You're taking your contact point from, sure, one intersection, you're moving it to at least 3. As everybody else has stated, not only are you going to have deceleration lanes, accelerating in 70-mile-an-hour traffic just to get into a merging lane. Once you make the U-turn, having to increase your speed to match the speed of the traffic coming. It's just, it's not going to work. There may be better ideas. Do I think a stoplight would fix it? Possibly not. Is this our turn going to work? Absolutely not. The computer-generated statistics are just that. It doesn't put into account the human factor. I don't care what anybody says. That's all I got.
Thank you, Mr. Edmonds. We're done.
Hello, my name is Shelby Dickerson. I've lived in this county for the best part of my life, and I'd like to thank the supervisors for listening to what I have to say, and also all you people who took your time tonight to be here to support this cause for a stoplight. I would like to speak on behalf of the loved ones and those who have lost their life and maybe have relatives that they are supporting the burden of critical injuries that have been lost at our crossroads. If I thought for 1 minute that this R-turn would do one thing to stop just one accident, I'd be the first one to stand up here and say, yes, let's do it. But I do not think that this R-turn will do that job. I think a stoplight will. On behalf of those who have lost loved ones and those who are carrying the burden of taking care of people that have been critically injured, and on behalf of those that might be in the foreseeable future, people that maybe are in my family, possibly in your family, at this dangerous crossroads, let's use some common sense. People have presented an argument of why this R-turn is not a viable idea, while stoplight is a better idea. What is the criteria for money for one life or one person that will be saved from possibly a critical injury or losing a loved one, maybe somebody even in your own family? I'm here to say that I feel like a stoplight could prevent that one death. And how do you put a price tag on that? And that, thank you for letting me have my say.
Would anyone else like to come up and speak?
Good evening, Board. Richard Lane, Gloucester Point. Let me tell you a little bit about my day. Until about 15 minutes before 6, got a phone call from a friend. Said, hey, Adeline could use all the support she could get. And I agree with that, so that's why I'm here. I'm a CDL driver. Been a CDL driver for when they thought of having CDLs. And before I walked in that door, I didn't even know what this R-turn business was. I did see it for a split second on Facebook today, just talking of an R-turn. What in the world's an R-turn? But I've learned here tonight what an R-turn is. The truck I drive, at that intersection, I drive a concrete mixer, by the way, with drop axles and all of that stuff, almost 80,000 pounds. In this instance, I would probably get run into. I'm not worried about myself. That's a pretty big truck. Most intersections, I can't make a U-turn at. Arc, I probably could, if it's left like it is. But this R-turn business, putting a U-turn down here and a U-turn down there, that's the most ridiculous thing I think I've ever heard. To be honest with you, when it comes to saving lives. Now, I've lived here all my life. I go up there, like I say, I live in Gloucester Point, but I'm a country boy, so I go to the country as often as I can. I think, and if budget's a problem, I'd be more than willing to pay a little bit more taxes to hire another officer. I think what's there would work. Maybe a few adjustments, adjust that speed limit, approaching that. Because personally, as a professional driver, I back off and slow down anyway because of the idiots that are on the road. And I invite any of y'all to ride with me. If you want to see how many idiots are on the road, I don't have much money to pay your salary, but I invite any of y'all to ride with me one day. Bring a pen and paper. See what that number is. It'll amaze you. Personally, I think if that became an intersection that was known for, I'm going to get a ticket if I do something stupid, like run the red light, roll the red light, have this fine officer right here sit there, make it notorious, make it Emporia. Emporia's got a reputation of getting a ticket to go through there. Right, if I roll the light, write me a ticket. But that would help more than I think right now. Well, one, a light would solve the issues, but it's not going to stop all the accidents because you know how many people run red lights. But adjust it, give it some time, write some tickets, make it famous like it's already famous, make it famous the other way. I think you'll see a difference. Thank you very much.
Mr. Wayne. Would anyone else like to come and speak? Ms. Cronin, do we have any phone calls or emails? All right, last call. All right, we'll close the citizen comment period. We're going to move to the discussion and decision on the Woods Crossroads. Ms. Rizzio.
It's going to be a hard act to follow. So while Tricia's pulling that up, good evening, Mr. Chair, members of the board. So yeah, I'm here to just present some facts, some background on how we got to where we are for your discussion and decision moving forward. So as was stated, Woods Crossroad is a very dangerous intersection. In 2009, it was identified as a high-risk rural road intersection. In 2021, we had the HRTPO do a study for us on transportation improvements, and they identified that intersection, which is the dot at the top, as well as the T.C. Walker intersection as safety needs. T.C. Walker was funded in last round of Smart Scale. It ranked number 50, and Woods Crossroad ranks number 59. When that was identified in the talk about potential improvements, the county did ask VDOT to do a signal warrant analysis to see if Woods Crossroad would qualify for a signal. It did not. I do have a copy of that. If anybody would like to see it, please get with me after. They evaluated on a number of different warrants, and it didn't meet. And the main thing is there's a number of different warrants it can meet under to where you can consider a traffic signal. It met none of them. One of the key factors, while it met the number of crashes needed, one of the key factors was the number of traffic going through the intersection. And so in that analysis, when they did the analysis, they had recommended an R-cut intersection. So we had an opportunity to apply for a Smart Scale through the Middle Peninsula PDC. We did. The R-cut was funded. As was stated, it was ranked the #1 project in the district and number 7 in the state. In 2023,
As you know, VDOT removed some berms, installed some stop signs. I understand there have been, I think, 2 accidents since that was done.
Ms. Rizzo,
Yes.
on the second bullet, is that 59th in which district, HRTPO?
Fredericksburg.
That was Fredericksburg. So we moved from 59th to 6th in 3
So
years.
as far as they just looked at all the intersections and it was ranked 59th, the ranking of first was all the submitted applications. It was a top scoring project for implementation.
Thank you.
So why a restricted U-turn R-cut crossing? This is from the study that the HRTPO did, and it shows all the accidents that occurred between 2014 and 2018, and it's hard to see on this slide, but they're all the angle type crashes, which are the most severe. They typically have serious injuries or fatal crashes, and that is what a restricted R-cut crossing is supposed to address. The study we were looking at, before we applied, we had done a 3-year study between 2021, like 2019 to 2021, and there were 23 crashes during that time, and they were all angle type. So research, R-cuts are done a lot in North Carolina and other states, and research shows when they look at the intersections that it has a 50% crash rate reduction and 66% reduction in fatal and serious injury crashes. And they look at the intersection. An angle crash is, so this is 17. An angle crash is when somebody's coming this way and gets hit by somebody coming south on 17 or north on 17. So you're making this T-bow. There you go. Simpler term. So smart scale. So we applied for smart scale. There were 46 projects submitted in the Fredericksburg district. 24 were funded, and again, Woods Crossroad was the top one. The second one that we were awarded was ranked number 7. And you see, in our district, smart scale is a very complicated ranking system, but in our district, economic development and safety are the top, the way you get most points. Woods Crossroad only scored in safety. So I think everybody agrees that Woods Crossroad needs something. And it ranked at 32 just in those points. The next scoring project was also an R-cut in King and Queen, and that scored, it had 12 points. So kind of signifies the importance of something needing to be done to address Woods Crossroad. So we had the public meeting. VDOT held a public meeting on March 27th. There were a lot of many statements, a lot of common themes. Install the light. I think everybody here, if we could install the light, we would say yes. Let's install the light. It doesn't meet warrant. It's not possible, and even if the county had the funding or somebody else had the funding, it has to meet the warrant for it to be installed. Save Dutton Store, we heard that loud and clear. VDOT has agreed to remove any of the access improvements in front of Dutton Store, and I have a slide on the next that'll show you the concept and those things that are being removed. Reduce the speed limit, as was mentioned here. That's another idea, as was mentioned, was recently raised to 60. I don't know, something to reduce it down in that area. And then concerned, again, we heard tonight about the U-turns, that you're just moving the crashes to the U-turns. In the research that I did, and I did confirm with other transportation engineers and VDOT, that when they look at the safety results of an R-cut, it does take into account reducing crashes at everywhere. But again, the R-cut is focusing on those angle-type crashes, the most serious and fatal injury.
Ms. Rizzo, I noticed you said you had a survey down here, 78 online surveys sent to you, comment forms. What was the result of that, just briefly? What was the majority comment?
These right here: install a light, save Dutton Store,
so
reduce the speed limit.
Do something other than, okay.
Mostly those comments were what we heard over and over again. So 117 people attended, 52 submitted the form there, 78 online. So this is the concept that was submitted with the Smart Scale project. It is just a concept. It's not final design. It's just an idea of what it will look like. These were the access improvements proposed at Dutton, and all that green going away. That's no longer proposed. What is proposed to move forward is basically the changes here to where if you're traveling south on 17 and you want to, well, no, I'm sorry. If you're coming from Woods Crossroad and you want to go to Dutton's, you will make a right make a U-turn, and then another right. If, if, if you're traveling from Dutton Store going cross, again, it's the right, the U-turn, and up. If you're going north and south on 17, your access points don't change. There's something else I wanted. And as I was mentioned, also, because it is a safety project, very important, you know, Smart Scale, you fund projects for 6 years out. Because it is a safety project, there's a potential that it will move sooner than that to get something installed and for safety reasons. I think that's all I have. If you have any questions, I don't know if Lee wants to.
Mr. Hedrick.
As I recall from a few slides back, statistically, R-cuts reduced crashes by 66%. That's pretty good for an old guy. So, do we have any more data that would break that out to a 60-mile-an-hour speed limit? I suspect that these R-cuts go in at 45 mile an hour, 50. Yeah, in other words, that 66% probably takes in several different speed limits. It'd be nice to see what it actually does at 60 miles an hour.
I don't have that, but I can
Mr.
see if I
Bazzani.
can find it.
So I watched and listened to everybody out here tonight, and it appears abundantly clear to me that nobody wants this R-cut at Wood Crossroad. At the very least, they'd like to have a stoplight. The first time I heard about Smart Scale, it's a good program. It works for a lot of different things, but I don't think it's that smart this time for this intersection. So the smart thing to do would be install a stoplight. And you're going to spend that much to do an R-cut, you can put a stoplight there. I don't know what the differential in cost is. There has to be a differential in cost. I don't know what that is. Maybe Mr. McKnight can shed the light on that. But it's what the citizens want. And that's what we do. We represent our citizens. And the last thing, it sounds like it's going to hurt business, and I don't want to see that. We want businesses to thrive in Gloucester County. We don't want to see anything that can hurt opportunities for a business to thrive here in this county. So we should. I'm going to vote against doing this tonight.
Does anybody else have questions?
Mr. Chair, how much was this R-cut costing?
So it's $4 million if
$4
they
million.
instructed in fiscal year 29.
Okay, that's 6 years away, correct? Potentially, 6 years away. Stoplight, how much did that cost?
I think it was estimated at 500,000, if I'm not mistaken.
500,000?
Yeah. But again,
Thank you, sir. That's all I have.
Any more? Ken?
Y'all, I appreciate your enthusiasm and your input, but really, please stop.
Mr. McKnight, I have some questions for you. On the traffic signal warrant from June 27th of last year, it says, although the number of crashes met the criteria, the vehicle volume criteria was not met, nor the trial alternatives being implemented. Therefore, this warrant is not considered satisfied. The berm removal, would that count as an alternative being implemented?
no, that's just a modification of what was currently there.
So what would be an alternative?
Alternative to the signal, it'd be something like an R-cut or.
So if the R-cut doesn't work, then what happens?
If it doesn't work, there's nothing to say that a signal could not eventually down the road be installed at the intersection.
Okay. Can Gloucester install a stoplight at Gloucester's expense?
If it does, if it meets warrants, yes.
Okay. R-cut, how long does it take to install it? From design to finish?
I think that depends on the location. I'd
say which crossroads?
I'd hate to even speculate. That's fair. I don't know.
Okay. I've asked this question, so if arc cut is not effective, what's the alternative? A stoplight, correct?
If an R cut is not effective, I mean, one of the options could be a signal, yes.
What would be the other alternative?
Again, and we're talking specifically Woods Crossroads. I mean, we could look at, honestly, I don't know at this time.
Two questions onto that. Would the rumble strips count as that was an alternative tried, and would the, if not?
No, it would be something like like a roundabout, R-cut. A roundabout would not be warranted here. Let me just go ahead and, before everybody, a roundabout would not be warranted at Woods Crossroads. I want to make that as clear as possible.
Would lowering the speed limit, and if accidents continued, would that count as an alternative?
No, it's something like a intersection treatment.
Design change.
Yes, like a restricted U-turn crossing, a roundabout, a MUT, something like that. But no, the other options, that would not.
Okay. Well, go ahead. I was asking questions, but go ahead.
When the study and the recommendation for the R-cut was made, was there specific look at the number of trailers and vehicles that come in that are so different than go to the food line, which is mainly residential other than a few of their delivery trucks? But this is, again, the people, and I know I go through this intersection, I have family members down there too, and it's a lot of trailers.
When they do the traffic counts, that does take they measure what kind of vehicles they are, how fast they're moving. So it does count the number of tractor trailers, the number of axles that the vehicle has. If it was a motorcycle, it can even count that as well.
All right, so when VDOT is looking at whether an R-cut is appropriate, then they would have looked at the types of vehicles that are coming through this specific intersection before recommending it.
That's correct.
Finished? Okay. It's been said, but will any of Dutton's Groceries property be taken away to construct?
No, sir.
Okay. If the board votes against the R-cut, will VDOT use other monies to install an R-cut?
There has been no funding identified to do that.
Is there a possibility of that?
There could be a possibility, but there's no funding available at this time.
In all the studies, are the U-turn portion of the R-cut safer, or do some studies show them not as safe?
So I can understand the apprehension with the U-turn, especially when you use the term U-turn, and maybe they need to change the terminology and call it a J-turn or something. I don't know. But what an R-cut does is, and I know I've said this many, many times at meetings, is it removes those conflict points. And I've heard the comments where it'll move those accidents further down the road to the turnaround locations. And what that does is now there's only one point of conflict at that location. They only have one decision to make. Is there a vehicle coming from south moving northbound up 17? No, they're good to go. Yes, they stop. Is there a vehicle coming southbound on 17? No, then you're good to go. And that's really, it's that simple. Whereas right now what you have is you have a lot of different decisions that need to be made very, very quickly. You have vehicles coming from across Woods Crossroads, in Davenport, in the intersection, you have vehicles traveling both directions on 17 northbound and southbound. Is that vehicle turning left off of Davenport onto northbound 17, or is it going straight across to Woods Crossroads? So really what this does is it removes all that ambiguity. reduces the number of conflict points and the decision points that need to be made. It just makes it much more simple. And I realize that it's something new, and it's, I will mention that there are other examples of this in Gloucester, and now not at this scale, admittedly, but down 17 in front of the old Walmart, in that area, there's a few. And then the Saluda R-Cut is the closest as a fully built-out R-Cut in this area.
Okay. The part that was, and I believe his name was Mr. Lane, mentioned about tractors, commercial vehicles, farm implements.
Yep.
Will the loon be designed, the loon is the part on the side of the road, would that be designed?
Yes, again, everything that we've seen up to this point is all conceptual. It has not been designed. It doesn't have funding attached to it, so we still have a long way to go. There's still a lot more, if it is approved, there's still a lot more public hearings that need to be had, and that sort of thing. So this is by no means the end of the conversations.
One more question. Before a decision is made, can we see the effectiveness of the berms being cut down with traffic, with accidents?
In terms of?
Waiting to see what's been done.
Well, so the CTB votes on the funding scenarios in June, so the decision would need to be made before then.
But I also feel that if it's the number 6th or 7th in our region, it would be, if you fix another one, we would at least be 6th or 7th next year. So we could look and see what was done and see if the berm has done anything and see if there's other measures that could be made.
Well, and again, Smart Scale is a biennial application process, so you would be at least 2 years into applying for the grant again, which would then push it out another 6 years, potentially. And obviously, there's always possibilities for accelerating funding, as we're seeing right now.
Dr. Orth.
Thanks, Mr. Chair. So first, I want to thank all of you who have come and expressed your opinions. As Mr. Bazzani said, and I know Mr. Chriscoe has said repeatedly, we do our best to listen to the opinions of the people. You know, they're our citizens. They're the ones who have voted us in office, and we listen respectively to their opinions. I do want to echo Mr. Bazzani's comments about businesses. We really do our best to encourage and support small businesses in this county. We wouldn't want to do anything to hurt the small businesses. And given that there's so few up there, anything that would hurt those two businesses, I would not be in favor of. And speaking about small businesses, the people that made comments about turning with trailers, it hit home with me because when I travel down south with my boat trailer and I want to go to Oyster Cove, I refuse to take that little R-cut across from the store. I go in, I make a right, I go into Wawa, turn around, and make the left-hand turn at the light so I can get into Oyster Cove. I don't even do it with my car anymore, because if I go to that little R-cut, trying to get across 17 when people are coming home from work, you put your life in your hand. So I just, pulling trailers, and even bigger than my little boat, I would never do that. And the woman who made comments about the school bus, again, safety should be the #1 issue. And that woman who said she has had no accidents because they're safe. They teach them safety. We have just too many nuts on the road. People have commented about the nuts on the road. Just watch people coming off the bridge on 17 going home, and the crazy things that people do on 17 to get home 1 minute faster so they can have a beer and watch TV. It's crazy, and I think that I personally listen to the public, and I think my comments speak loudly as to where I stand on this particular issue.
Mr. Bazzani. Oh, Mr. Hedrick.
So if we kick this down the road and don't take this funding, have you got any idea how long it would be before we could get a traffic light?
It would all be based on the traffic counts and the growth of the area on the side streets of Woods Crossroads and Davenport.
Yeah, I think the last time we discussed that here, we were thinking 10 to 20 years, if I remember correctly.
I don't know the time
Yeah,
period. but-
as far as the traffic flow.
Right.
From the
side
side
streets.
roads.
Yes, sir.
It's got to reach some level before, and are you guys flexible with that? I mean, could we give you some financial incentive to put the light in, even if the traffic didn't meet the standard?
If it doesn't meet warrants, the signal cannot be installed.
Okay, thank you.
Chair, thank you, Mr. Chair. This is a 6-year plan, and even if we don't vote to have the R-cut put in, wouldn't it be just prudent and far cheaper to put a flashing light and maybe a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit at Woods Crossroads until such time that something happens? Because one death, what kind of price do you put on that?
Right, absolutely.
So, in my view, maybe in the interim until VDOT comes up with a better plan, like a stoplight or whatever plan they might conceive, wouldn't it be better just to put a flashing light with a 35-mile-an-hour speed limit? Because I consider myself the best driver in the world, and everybody else doesn't drive as well as I do. My wife, anyway, my wife thinks I'm a nut driver, but that's okay. But I think that would be the right thing to do. I think, Mr. McKnight, for this time, for these good folks that came out here tonight, and we heard. I mean, 99. I calculate 99% of them don't want this thing in there. So that's my comment.
Mr. Hedrick.
Okay, so most of the people that live in that area are opposed to this, and I certainly appreciate you folks coming here tonight and let us know that. But let's all consider the hundreds of thousands of vehicles that travel through that intersection each year that are people from out of state, people that live in the central part of the state. If this board doesn't do something to improve the safety of that intersection, we're not doing our job. And I take certainly, as serious as I possibly can, your folks' opinions. But I have to take in a bigger picture. I have to look at the whole traveling public. And that's where my vote's going to be placed. I have total confidence that the Virginia Department of Transportation knows how to do the things that make our roads safe. And just go to Main Street, look at 14-3. I heard the same complaints about that intersection, that it would never work. This was going to be wrong, and it worked out just fine. And there's many other examples. Thank you, sir.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Just to piggyback on something Mr. Hedrick said, I would say if we had 100,000 people traveling that intersection annually, we'd qualify for a stoplight. The Smart Scale program has gone through several iterations since my time on the board. It's made up of a pool of 5 different pots of money, all funded by us, the taxpayer. So with that being said, I've been saying this a lot, especially with VDOT here, and actually I've said it to a few other agencies, not just VDOT. It's time that this board and the people in government start listening to the people that pay the bills, and that's you, the taxpayer. With that being said, there is no chance that I will be supporting this project at this time.
Mr. Gibson.
I just have comments, no questions. First of all, I appreciate everyone who's come out tonight to voice their opinion, and I'm voting no on the R-cut, and I want to tell you why. I think we've talked about, we can get caught up with acceleration lanes and conflict points, but what we're really talking about is people's lives. I represent people who've been injured in car crashes, and I've represented people who've been injured at Woods Crossroads, and I've seen the pictures of the mangled cars, and I've seen the pictures, unfortunately, of the mangled bodies and the blood on the airbags and on the dashboards. And every day we don't do something, lives are going to be lost and people are going to get injured. And we need to use our common sense. And I hear common sense is repeated among many people who've spoken tonight. And common sense is that Woods Crossroads is the most dangerous intersection in Gloucester. Amen. VDOT knows it. We all know it. And so we need to find the most simple, most cost-effective solution for that intersection. And then, without a doubt, that is a traffic light. And what has been so confusing to me, trying to wrap my mind around this, is the study by VDOT. And I'm not blaming Mr. McKnight, because I think these guidelines are handed down from the federal government. But the federal government has set these formulas. And the formula says, if you don't have enough traffic at that intersection, it doesn't, quote, warrant, you shouldn't get a stoplight. But that doesn't use common sense. And I've been trying to think about an analogy. It was as if we had a very small neighborhood here in Gloucester, but very high crime, lots of drugs, lots of shootings, and there were 5 murders in there each year. But the police said, you know what? We're not going in there. That neighborhood's too small. You know, we've got 5 murders, but we're not going to take any action. Well, here, we have the most crashes in the county. We have one of the most dangerous intersections in the transportation district, but because based on the number of crashes, we should have a traffic light. But based on the number of cars, we lose. That makes no sense. The simplest solution is a traffic light. The most cost-effective solution is a traffic light. $4 million for an R-cut. $500,000 for a traffic light. This is your money. This is your money, money that you work hard to pay for, your tax dollars, and VDOT wants to spend $3.5 million more for a solution that we all know a traffic light will make that intersection more safe. I can't fathom how we're going to vote for something that would spend $3.5 million of taxpayer money when we have a good solution for $500,000. I'm also concerned about the impact on Dutton's Grocery and Adelaide. She is a fixture in this community, so generous. And I don't want to do anything that would infringe upon her business. And actually, I wrote down what she said because I think it was very important. She said, "We the citizens, we the people." That's the first line of the United States Constitution. We the people. And it's time VDOT listened to we the people. Amen. I presented a few months ago petitions of over 600 people from the Petsworth area who said they wanted a stoplight, but nobody listened. You all made clear at the town hall that you didn't want the R-cut, but VDOT's still not listening. And over 80% of the citizens who filled out surveys, wrote letters, wrote emails, said they don't want the R-cut. But VDOT in Richmond is not listening. They have the money, they just won't spend it on what we the people are asking them to do. So I appreciate all of you being here. I'm voting no on the R-cut. We need to use our common sense again.
Well, we've got multiple options. One, I think we can do it tonight, Mr. Wilmot or Mr. McKnight, correct me if I'm wrong. We could pass a resolution requesting that VDOT lower the speed limit each side, north and south of Woods Crossroads, Davenport. Because I know we did it before and you raised the speed limit. We did it, sorry. But we can also go back and make a resolution to ask you to lower that speed limit. We can do that tonight, correct? Well, would you like to make that motion to lower the speed limit back to where it was? Mr. Wilmot, are you questioning it?
Well, I'm wondering, I see the public hearing materials, I don't see a resolution.
No, we don't have one.
We don't have one yet.
Well,
I would
okay.
sug-
We need to address the vote on the
Yes.
R-cut
The
first.
6-year plan.
We don't have, we just make a
Where's
decision.
the 6-year plan resolution? Do we have one?
Yes, that's.
But that's not, that's a public hearing, Mr. Woodlawn. We changed the agenda.
There's no resolution to this agenda.
You can make our esteemed counselor go to work and come up with a resolution.
I would encourage you to give thought to any specific legislative resolutions, pardon the pun, pending your resolution to the 6-year plan. So certainly, yes, sir, you could pass a resolution encouraging VDOT to reduce the speed limit along 17 in that area.
This is not in reference to the secondary 6-year plan.
I understand that, so you could do that, but it's not part of your packet.
Correct.
So,
But we could also ask you to draft something and come back
yes, sir.
at our next meeting.
What speed limit would you like and from what terminuses? Termini?
Well,
I think back when we had this discussion on the 60-mile-an-hour speed limit, that several of us said, hey, we should probably have 60-mile-per-hour start north of Woods Crossroads instead of north of, I believe it was
Funeral
the
home.
Howard Funeral Home. I think it would be in our best interest to move that 60-mile-an-hour speed limit all the way north of the intersection of Woods Crossroads.
That would make it 55 in that area, not 45 or 35. So that's something that y'all should be clear on.
well, the speed limit before it was increased was 55.
Yes, sir.
Well, that's something we can look at. The other option we have on,
Mr. Chair, if I may, I think a reduction, and I'm not asking for this motion tonight, I think we need to give it a little bit more thought, but I think a reduction down to 45 would be appropriate. But the other aspect of this is it's going to be nothing if we don't have strict enforcement there, so people understand, and all credit to Sheriff Warren and his officers, but I think it would need to be a priority of the Sheriff's Department to enforce that speed limit.
well, I know you've got a state trooper that likes to hang out by Trailer World at the Point, so he could maybe move to the north. So, I see him all the time. I'm sure he can get free coffee at a little store. The other option we've got right now is we vote yes or no on that, or we wait and see, not make a decision on it, and see if the current issues that have corrected the road or that have been addressed do anything for the accidents on 17 and Woods Crossroad and Davenport.
Mr. Chair, the speed limits remain the same?
For right now, we're gonna have to change that at our next meeting. And I think that if, based on what we had before, if, based on what Mr. Gibson said at 45, then it would be a start before Woods Crossroad, Davenport, to a terminus further south, north and south.
Mr. Chair, would you like to create or have Ms. Steele create a subcommittee or a committee to come forth with a recommendation regarding the termini of the reduced speed limit area and the speed limit to which it is reduced? Because I don't think you're going to be able to do that tonight.
No, we're not planning to do that tonight.
So maybe either Ms. Steele is tasked with creating a subcommittee to recommend that, or you could, understanding that if you create it, then it's foiable, but it's fine either way.
Well, with the transportation committee that already exists, we could add Mr. Gibson, since that is his district, to that for a meeting or two to get beginning and end points, if that would be available.
You could refer this matter to that transportation committee with Mr. Gibson's input.
Yes, and add him to it as a, not add him to it, but have him as a, yeah.
Mr. Chair.
Yes, Mr. Smith.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Wilmot, maybe can help me with this. We can vote yea or nay to the R cut tonight. I would like for us to vote yes or no for the R cut and put it to sleep tonight.
Mr. Chair, since this group did not put that application in, if the board wants to consider that, should it be asking the PDC to withdraw the application? Or I'm just thinking, if you want to put something to a motion and make sure that it's done the correct way.
You could have a motion to the effect that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors opposes the installation of an R cut in that area and authorizes and directs all actions necessary and appropriate to effect that dictate or desire.
I would so move as stated.
Second.
What would happen if the PDC decided to keep it? They won't. I know they won't, but I'm just asking.
Do you appoint the PDC, or do you appoint members to it, or do you have
Appoint
any
a
funding for it?
A member.
We have 2 members and a citizen rep, and I'm currently the chairman of the Middle Peninsula Planning
Do
District
we
Commission.
fund them?
The county?
Yes.
Well,
Funds
then
portion.
perhaps they would have no funding.
Okay. I mean, just checking. Ms. Steele, we have a motion and a second. We don't
I'm
have,
not going to try to read the motion back, but it was to authorize and direct.
Installation of the arc. I'm sorry, the Board of Supervisors opposes installation of the R cut and authorizes and directs all actions necessary and appropriate to effect that.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Dr. Orth? Yes. Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Motion carries unanimously.
All right, we're going to take about a 5-10 minute break.
The chair has authorized a break, so that if you all want to go home and have fun and
Proposed secondary 6-year plan for fiscal years 2024 through 2029 and construction of the budget for 2024-2029. Ms. Cronin, has this been properly advertised? All right. Ms. Rizzio.
Okay. So yeah, this is a public hearing to adopt the secondary road 6-year plan. Again, this is the little pot of money that Gloucester does get that we can decide what to do with. We get 2 pots, one paved road, one unpaved. We're going to talk about both separately. So we'll start with the paved road projects. We get about a little under 106,000 a year to dedicate to various projects. We have 3 projects currently in the plan that I have slides on, Fiddler's Green and Providence Road that we talked about last time, a little update on Providence. And then at last meeting, when we were preparing for the public hearing, adding Little England paving to the secondary 6-year was a suggestion. So we got some numbers on that, and it would be a future funded project. It would not be able to be implemented until 2026, 2027 due to the amount of funding that we currently have. So existing projects, Fiddler's Green, again, the right turn lane we've been waiting for a while, and some sidewalk connections starting this summer. The other project we have is the Providence Road right turn lane. This one we had on hold pending smart scale results. We tried 2 rounds, were not successful. a couple weeks ago when we were here, we thought that we were working something out with some area developers, trying to make the intersection work with everybody involved, and that has fallen through. So we are back to putting this project, I think we just bite the bullet, move forward with it, have VDOT make it their next priority. It's basically to add a right turn lane to Providence Road. It will not impact the other development that is going on or may go on in the corridor. We will just be working within our existing right-of-way to do what we could to make that dedicated right turn lane. I think that's it. So not proposed to be temporary or on hold. Say let's go ahead and move forward with that project. It's just the conceptual, it'd have to go through design and everything. The project that was proposed last time was Little England Road paving. There's a picture of Little England on the left. Again, it would be a future year project. It's currently tar and chip seal process, and there's a lot of exposed tar. The road is narrow. Of course, the paving would not widen it. It would just pave it. It would go, the estimate was for $276,000, about a mile and a half from Mark Pine to the end of state maintenance on Little England. An alternative to that, if we want to save our secondary 6-year dollars, would be to ask VDOT to add it to their routine maintenance and do the Cape seal instead of tar and seal, do the Cape seal, which is a similar process, and Lee can probably tell you more exactly what it is, but it comes back with a coat on top of that, kind of sealing everything together. And the picture on the right is where it was recently done on Sawgrass Point.
Was that the same type of road?
Yes.
The same type of, in terms of surface treated?
No,
Yes.
the same surface before it was treated.
It was the same surface as Little England Road, yes.
Thank you.
So that's paved roads. So unpaved roads, a little easier. There's just one proposed. It has to meet greater than 50 average annual ADT. Bonneville qualified. It's proposed to be added. It can be funded this year and move forward. That's where it is, down off Jenkins Neck. So summary resolution, we recommend we definitely keep the existing projects as a priority in the fund. Fiddler's Green right turn lane, sidewalk connections, and Providence Road right turn lane. And then the question is, do we want to add Little England paving? And under unpaved, we want to add Bonneville Road. So I can go back to the funding slide for you guys to discuss. And there's also was in your packet a sheet of funding. So, are there any questions for me, or?
We'll open up, yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Would addressing Little England through this plan or maintenance get it addressed more quickly? Maybe this is a Mr. McKnight question, but is there a, what would be the quickest, most efficient way to address Little England?
In terms of, if we were to do it through the resurfacing program, obviously we're creating the 26 schedule right now. There is no guaranteed based on current funding schedules of any of those roads, so I could not say if it would go in 26 or if it'd be pushed to 27 or 28. It just all depends, sorry, Carol. It all depends on funding levels and then other priorities that are currently within the plan.
Okay.
Mr. Bazzani.
Just a quick comment as well. You know, we heard Mr. Hodges say we have a $3.6 billion surplus. Maybe he needs to represent us more.
Any more questions?
I have a comment, or a couple of comments, actually. One is, I agree, Mr. Gibson, that we'd like to get this Little England done sooner than later. I think making sure that we keep it added to our 6-year program at least ensures that something's going to happen on that road at some point when funding is available. So I'm all for keeping that. Now, just for my fun, can you go back to the slide that shows the Fiddler Green right turn lane? Because this is my fun right here. Because that sidewalk that you see coming there with the no turn on red, right on red sign right there, that sidewalk, you know what that sidewalk was paid for? It was called H2B when we got that one funded. And you know what that right turn lane is going to do, don't you? We're tearing up that sidewalk to put in the right turn lane, to come back and put in the sidewalk again with the special, smart scale funding that comes from 5 different pots of money. That's why I can't support something like an R-cut when we're doing this right up the road from where we're sitting currently.
Yes.
What will be a solution, Mr. Chriscoe?
No. The solution would have been, hey, you won the money for that.
Yeah.
Let's do that when we put in your right turn lane instead of putting it in to tear it up to put it back in again.
Got it.
Because the right turn lane was on this program at the same time that sidewalk got funded. This right turn lane has been on there for a while, and now we're going to get it funded. But because the way the H2B and Smart Scale worked, it had to get done because that funding was available. And that is a waste of taxpayer dollars right there.
All right, any more questions, comments right now? Let's open up the citizen comment period.
How y'all doing? My name is Randy Orr from York District. Hoo-wee, I'll tell you, that was something. It's sad that really people have to get hurt before people are going to spend money, especially the state. I was sitting in the bar drinking a beer, minding my own business. This guy beside me asked, "Where are you from?" I told him, I'm from Virginia. He said, "Oh, you from the Commonwealth of Virginia?" I said, "No, I'm from the Common Broke of Virginia. We don't have any money to fix nothing." But it's sad that it's going to get to that point. You talk about Woods Crossroads. My neighbor's son got in an accident there a month and a half ago. I'm glad he made it. Don't know how he made it out of there, but everything worked out. Both of these roads obviously are big safety issues, and it's just sad. It's really, really sad that it gets to the point where somebody has to get hurt, or 2 or 3 or 4 or more people. I imagine if a politician's relative got hurt, they'd probably run down here and put a stoplight up there real quick like they do for other things. But that's one thing that blows my mind is you're going to put this R-turn or whatever they were talking for $4 million. You could put a light in for $500,000, save $3.5 million, come down to Little England, fix that road, and you still have money in the bank. But thank you, every one of you, really, for listening, because that's really what it's about. And showing up when we ask you to come down to Little England, I want to thank everybody. I appreciate your comments, but and that's what it's about. Tell me what's on your mind, and I want to thank every one of you for that. It means a lot to me. Thank you. And the ones that spearheaded this thing, Mr. Smith, Mr. Chriscoe, Dr. Orth, I appreciate Philip and Carol for showing up, George Baines for coming down there, and Mr. McKnight. So, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Orth.
Thank you. Anyone else like to speak?
Nathan Brown from the Ware District. I remember when we used to get $500,000, when $500,000 was really some money to spend on secondary roads. And now we don't get anything. We've spent all this time, and you spent all this time, your staff is spending time, we're having a public hearing which you have to advertise to spend $106,000. And what are we spending on? We're spending it on fixing entrances on the Highway 17. That used to be paid for with primary money. We didn't have to pay for that. They had to fix the whole damn intersection. They didn't come in and say, well, that's 5 foot off the damn road. You got to come up with another source of funding. So I think you need to tell the General Assembly, look, we're not going to have a public hearing next year. We'll just wait till the next biennium, or 3 years, 4 years, or whatever, till you send us enough money where it's worth our time to have a public hearing about it. and waste the public's time, you know, thinking nobody showed up. So it's just bizarre to me. And, you know, I don't know. I mean, you know, Little England Road needs fixing. Maybe we just have to do it 100 foot at a time. Make them do 100 foot at a time. I don't know, do they have any damn, any limit? I mean, because that's the only way you're gonna get it fixed. Thank you, Baba.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. Would anyone else like to speak? Ms. Cronin, do we have any emails or? All right, let's close the public comment portion. We've got a resolution that was given out to each seat tonight. But where we need to look at it is, what do we want to add, delete, or anything else? Ms. Cronin, I know you deleted it, took it off. Could you bring it back up? Earlier.
So, earlier.
Yeah, keep going back one. Right there. So, I guess my question for Mr. McKnight is, if it's $276,000 to repave it, if we were to cover it, such as Sawgrass Point, what would that cost be?
Well, to the county, it wouldn't come out of the secondary six-year plan. It'd come out of the VDOT's maintenance budget. I'd have to look at, it would be less than 276. 276 was asphalt, assuming 1.5 inches of asphalt, 18 inches, obviously that's just an assumption, including shoulder stone for the entire length of the road.
And if you use the other, what is that doing?
The Cape Seal?
Cape Seal.
I didn't look at that. I mean,
no, would that be the gravel on the side and everything else?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Yeah, there would still be gravel on the shoulders after it was done. We could still look at doing some patching as we've done out there currently before the Cape Seal project comes through, and then that they would shoot the road again with chip and tar, and then seal it with what you saw in Sawgrass Point, which is known as a latex or a Cape Seal, and that's really what gives it. It's a smoother surface. It's more substantial. Again, if you're in the neighborhood, go down to Sawgrass Point if you want to see a real on the ground example of a Cape Seal.
Question for you.
Mr. Chriscoe.
How long does the Cape Seal last versus asphalt?
I think that depends on the location, if it's on a primary or a secondary road, or in this case, Little England. I think it all depends on the amount of traffic, if it's truck traffic, that sort of thing.
Well,
how good is the base? But
same.
Well, okay, so in 2014, they Cape Sealed Route 14 in Matthews down to the New Point, and it's still there currently. That's a primary road, albeit a relatively in terms of primaries, less traveled road, but it is still functioning. They did cut some rumble strips that I'm still a little upset about, that kind of ruined some of the edge lines, but other than that, structurally speaking, it's held up well.
How long would the asphalt last there?
Again, I think it just depends on the amount of traffic.
How long would it last there going to New Point?
Oh, going to New Point.
Like you said.
Again, 10, 12 years, probably,
so
maybe a little bit more. It really depends. I'd hate to even speculate.
And the earliest conceivable it would be done if we were to do the Cape Seal would be 26?
So 23 is going, 24 is done. We're currently creating 25, probably 26, but we could look at moving things around.
In the secondary 6-year plan, the earliest it would be 26, right?
According to those fundings, yes.
Mr. Bazzani.
The 336 folks that live on Little England Road and its ancillary roads have for years have had their driveways re-cleaned, re-power washed because of the tar coming out like a primordial ooze out of the road. And I think the citizens, and there was a petition commissioned and a study commissioned, and well over 200 people signed the petition to have the road redone. And I live there, full disclosure. But I think we should keep this on the 6-year plan so that this road gets fixed, because right now it is a severe safety hazard for school buses. Mr. Smith was down there, we came down and saw 2 or 3 school buses, and they're almost running off the road because it was so narrow. And you do have about another foot on each side that would probably fix the school buses way through there. And plus we have these giant trucks that come down Little England Road that over the years have just eroded the road to the point where it's, to the farm, the Little England farm, it's only like 5 or 6 feet wide. So I think, gentlemen, I think the citizens on Little England would appreciate it.
I would agree that we need to keep Little England on this proposed list, so that way, depending upon whether or not Mr. McKnight and VDOT can do the Cape Seal, or we do the asphalt at such time that the funding becomes available, I think that way we know something is getting done to that road in 26, so that at the latest. I mean, the Cape Seal perhaps could happen earlier if funding changes or another project comes off for some other reason, but I think we should leave it in for us for this.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes, Mr. Chair, I would also support it, including it on this plan. I think the biggest thing that stuck out to me from the board members who've been down there, I'm very sympathetic to the residents, of course, but when you talk about those school buses and the narrowness of that road and the potential for a crash of a school bus with our children on that concerns me, so that's why I'm supporting this.
And just to clarify, this is not widening the road. This is just putting what's currently down.
The actual part that you did asphalt did widen the road by about a foot on each side.
Right.
So that did widen it, and the school buses enjoy that now, right? But the school buses on before and after that are suffering.
Mr. McKnight, if we were to include Little England Road on the secondary 6-year plan, would that move it off of the Cape?
No, and that's a good question. What we try to do when we're planning resurfacing, because it makes, and I know Mr. Chriscoe, you'll appreciate this, but we try to group these roads in geographic locations, and that does a couple things. Number one, when we're planning this out, if I can anticipate when this cluster of roads is going to need to be resurfaced, they're all clustered in one location as opposed to spread out all over the county. And that helps for planning purposes. It also allows us to get a better price from the contractor when they're bidding, because they're not having to move their equipment, from Gloucester Point all the way up to Petsworth. It's kind of centralized. So I try very hard when we're planning these out to look at these in geographic locations, and in this case, we would definitely look at Oyster Cove and DeGrasse and Little England and some of those ancillary, Blake's View, some of those ancillary roads around the area, and make sure that we're getting those as well. But it'd have to fall into funding levels with the plan.
All right. As long as it will stay with potentially being done both ways.
So would the resolution include Little England?
I see it does not. with what I'm looking at, it does not, because we had the question mark in the presentation. I think we would need to add that, if I'm understanding this correctly, and I'm getting the head nod from Mrs. Cronin. So I think we would need to add the Little England paving project.
And the road, what was the other one?
I think Bonneville's included, isn't it?
That is included.
That is included, yes. What I would suggest, and because we're gonna have to make a project, it's gonna have to have a UPC number associated with Little England, and we can do that at a later date. It doesn't have to happen tonight. I would suggest approving the plan with the adding Little England Road improvements at a later date. That would be my suggestion.
At what, how much later?
You can do it any time. It's not gonna be fully funded until FY '26, so you could theoretically do it next year during the public hearing for secondary 6-year plan, but you could do it again later, in the year.
Yeah.
That's certainly possible.
Okay, well, if it's better.
No, we add it now. There's no need to wait. We have it here, public hearing's been advertised, it's been done. I say we make the motion for the resolution approving the secondary 6-year plan for fiscal years '24 through '29 and the construction priority list to include Little England paving project.
Okay, comments, what were you saying?
Well, it doesn't have a project associated with it, so it's not on this plan. It hasn't been added to the plan.
So it's gotta be added before we can.
It doesn't have a project associated with it. There is no project currently.
If we add it, does that make it a project?
There has to be a UPC number created. It has to, what you see on that plan.
That's a VDOT issue at this point. My goal is to pass a resolution instructing VDOT what we want to do. And what we want to do is we want to approve this 6-year plan with the construction priority list, and now we can allow VDOT to make the UPC code and add it to what we've agreed to tonight.
You ready for the vote?
Ready for a vote?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson? Yes. And Dr. Orth? Motion carries.
All right. We'll move to the regular agenda. Recreational Trails Program grant application for Beaver Dam Park. Trail signs, benches, and restroom renovations. Ms. Legg.
Good evening. So tonight, what I am looking for is a resolution of support to apply for this grant. This is through the Virginia Department of Conservation and Recreation. They do, most of the time, an annual recreational trails program grant. I actually came to you last year to apply for the same grant for almost the same project. However, when they awarded projects last year, they chose to award projects that funded new trail construction, not any type of maintenance items. And this year, they are only funding maintenance or amenity improvement items, which puts us in a really good position. We scored really well overall in our application last year, except we didn't meet some of the other nicer criteria when it talks about adding trail access. So the project is similar, however, what I have added this year is to replace the siding and the roof of the Beaver Dam 606 restroom and picnic shelter building. So the project would include trail markers along roughly 15 miles of trails at Beaver Dam. It includes 14 guide kiosks, which is where all of the loops intersect to help people find their way, and 2 kiosks, one at each entrance of the main trail. And then, of course, the siding and the roof. This is an 80-20 grant, so the state would provide 80%. The 20% match, $15,000 of it is available in a Park Operations Donations Committed Fund, and the remaining $11,750 would come from the Facility Maintenance Repair and Replacement Fund, did I get it right? FMRR. We put forward in FY24 a request to re-side and re-roof that building at Beaver Dam. And so we just want to leverage some of those funds as the match, and then the remaining of those funds can be used for another project. The deadline for this grant is May 9th, and I think we have a really good chance this year.
All right, any questions for Ms. Legg?
One. Can you find us a grant for the pier?
I'll see what I can do. If it was on an actual water trail, I could consider that. I'll ask my DCR folks next time.
This is a neat opportunity, and I wish there was an easier funding stream for the pier there as well. I will make the motion to support this recreational trails program.
Resolution on page 69. Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson? Dr. Orth?
Yes.
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Next item on the agenda is a request for fiscal year '23 additional appropriation from Park Projects Capital Committee committed fund balance. Ms. Legg.
Yes, so there is a small amount, $4,256 in a Park Projects capital fund balance that was specifically for the Woodville Park Playground project when that was under construction a few years ago. Because those funds were donated for the playground, that is how they should be used. When the playground was constructed, the plan was for staff to seed the area around the poured-in-place rubber. And we have not been able to get grass seed established because kids play in more than just the playground. So all that has been left is sand and dirt, and that is getting on top of the poured rubber surface, which deteriorates it a whole lot faster. That surface is also meant to be draining, and so that sand is clogging it up. So we'd like to use this money to go ahead and lay sod around the playground and finish constructing a walkway from the parking lot to the playground to make it fully accessible and essentially be done with this playground.
Any questions for Ms. Legg? There's a resolution on page 71.
Second.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Next up is long-range capital planning for future capital needs. Ms. Steele and Mr. Cole.
This is, I hope we all need to take a deep breath for some re-energizing, because this is a very important topic that we discussed at the last meeting, and you all had, or a couple of meetings ago, and you all had asked to have Davenport come back. In your board packet is information that they're going to talk through, and then between questions, they'll take questions. Ms. Spivey and Ms. Callaway and I have been working on this, and we can take questions however. But I think the plan was to have Davenport and Ted, to go through and start talking about what's in here.
Okay, great. Good evening. I think everybody should have a hard copy of the presentation. I don't know if it was going to go on the screen or not. It's up to you all. The two primary topics that we want to cover is debt capacity and debt affordability. And you'll notice from the what's on the cover page, we're talking about debt in the context of county projects and school projects that are not eligible for the voted sales tax. So that's separate. The sales tax is separate. There's specific rules surrounding that. So we're talking about county and what we call ineligible school projects. Let's see. There are page numbers in the lower right corner. So if you go to page 2, I'm sorry. This is the core model that we have set up working with staff, and please ask questions as we go. But as I said, we're going to be talking about what sort of capacity and affordability do you all have to take on additional debt for whatever the purpose is. We're not modeling any particular projects, just talking about debt generally for projects that are not eligible for that sales tax. So as you look at this slide, on the left-hand side of the page through column G are the revenues that run through this debt model. And these tie back to your budget, right? So we have everything on a fiscal year basis in column A. The primary source of funding for this bucket of projects is a local transfer for debt service. It's a current year appropriation by you all of $4.36 million. And you'll see that we've assumed that's constant going forward. It's not going up, it's not going down. We afford it, and I think your budget for FY24 is being built around that assumption. So $4.3 million a year. In addition to that, in column C, you get some credits tied to some qualified school construction bonds, which was a federal stimulus program back in 2011 and 2012. You get credits for some of the interest or all of the interest that was incurred on those bonds. That is a known stream of revenue that's coming back to you that is eligible to be used to pay debt service. And then finally, column D, you have savings from a refunding that the Virginia Public School Authority did that included some of your debt. So there are three primary, and I guess I'd call ongoing revenue sources for this bucket of projects, okay? Column E is a placeholder. We're going to talk about that in a moment. Are there other dollars that we could identify to supplement this model? Column E. And then column F is pretty specific. We have two dollar amounts, one in 2024 and one in 2027, and they are footnoted there in footnote 3. The first year, the $1.5 million is made up of two dollar amounts. $500,000 that is to be appropriated from fund balance to make a portion of the radio lease payment. Okay, I think that's part of what's being discussed in your budget. That's $500,000 one time. And the other $1 million is funds that would come from the Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue Squad tied to a project for their benefit. So one-time dollars in FY24 of $1.5 million. And then let me address that $2.9 million. If things evolve the way we've discussed with staff, and there's a project done, and Carol, jump in if I misspeak, for the Gloucester Volunteer Fire and Rescue Squad, there would be the ability to try to sell either the land or the land in the building, where they...
It would be all of their assets
All of
that
their
are left.
assets.
So there's land that they own, and there's land with buildings on it.
Right. So that would be another potential source of revenue from the future sale of their assets. And in talking with staff, we've identified, based on what a construction schedule might be for the new facility, that those dollars might be recognized as early as FY27, right? And so those are two very specific dollar amounts that are tied to specific events or pots of money, okay? And so those are revenue sources. So you have column B, C, D, E, and F that all sum up to column G. And column G is the revenues available year by year to help support this bucket of projects called county and non-eligible school projects, right? So that's what we have to work with. So what do we have in terms of obligations? So column H is the portion of the existing county and school debt that is not eligible for that sales tax, right? So it's everything else that you have to pay for out of regular county dollars. And we know that to the penny, column H. We know exactly what those payments are each year. And you'll notice that they're stepping down over time. Some years the drop is more significant than the other. So that is an obligation stream of payments we have to make. Column I are lease agreements with York County. $700,000 for a few more years, it steps down to $500,000. I think probably all of y'all are familiar with what's behind all of that. That is a stream of payments we need to make. J is what we're going to solve for in a moment. What else could we possibly borrow, if you decided you wanted to, that could be supported within these cash flows? All right, so K will become the total requirements. So we have total revenues available in column G, and we have total requirements or payments to be made in column K, and we compare those in that column L. And what you'll see is L is to the good in FY24, or projected to be in the good by a little over $1 million. And we're accumulating that in the far right column under that capital reserve balance. So in column L in 2024, we've got about $1 million that we will set aside and have available to us later to help supplement a budget for debt. 2025 and 2026 are kind of our, for lack of a better term, our pinch point. Those are the 2 years where the revenues, the surplus revenues, are the smallest, $200,000. So if we wanted to borrow, and you'll see this is our assumption, a year from now, in the spring of 2024, which is on the tail end of fiscal 24, if we wanted to borrow in fiscal 24 and start making payments in 25, we don't have a whole lot of dollars there available to make the payment. Therefore, it's not going to allow us to issue much debt as a result of that. So that's what we're going to be measuring for you all. And we do have these capital reserves over here that is a resource to help afford debt. So this is the sort of the starting point, the framework. And again, we know there's existing debt and these radio leases that are need to be paid for. And our goal here is to try to give you perspective on what, in addition to that, you might be able to afford. Yes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. A quick question. Is there a stress test on the debt? In other words, how much debt can we take and still not run the risk of default or not being able to make the payments? Is there a stress test that you're going to present to us tonight?
Well, I guess we tend to look at it two ways. So let me address first debt capacity, right? So we talk about debt capacity, and we talk about how does the county's debt profile look relative to other similarly sized or rated communities. Do you have debt policies, and how much debt could you issue and still be in compliance with your policy? And we'll show you that in a moment, right? That gets to the debt capacity. Now, just because you have debt capacity does not mean it's affordable, right? Many of us individually, maybe on paper, hey, we can afford to borrow money for lots of different things, but in reality, the cash flows may not be there. So we need to also measure the affordability. And I think, like most local governments, not all, but many counties, it's not so much the capacity that limits you. You've got capacity. It's the affordability. Where are the dollars coming from to pay for this new level of debt service?
And that's what I mean by the stress. How much stress can we take?
Yes, we're gonna get there and help you understand what that pain threshold may be. But I wanted to make sure, I know there's a little tedious, but just make sure you understood sort of the cash flows of each year, and what we're going to begin solving for. We're going to primarily make our main goal is to determine how much debt service could fit into column J, and what kind of borrowing does that equate to. Okay?
So it looks like after 2044, the cumulative values in column M will add up to around 57 million. Am I reading that correctly?
That in theory, if you did no more debt, right?
Well, I won't
and
be
you
here, but
and you just let everything ride the way it is. Yes.
So we're 16. If we didn't do any more debt, we'd be 16 million to the good, approximately, between column K and column
Yes,
L.
and if you just kept collecting that column B every year and not spending it, 4.3 million goes nowhere but into a checking account.
I would mention if we didn't do the projects, though, we wouldn't have the money in F from fire and rescue. So it wouldn't quite be 57
Well, that's a
million.
good point. Those probably would not. But the lion's share of that in column B would just be setting aside $4 million a year just to hold it. But yes, that's the point of column. I've written over it, M as in Michael. For now, it's accumulating. That's going to change here in a moment. All right. All right. I've alluded to some of this on page 3. So a couple of things. We are backing into some debt capacity, additional debt borrowing. We're assuming that the debt is issued in the spring of '24. So that's a year from now. For example, if the county, you all determined that you wanted to hold a bond referendum in the fall of 2023, and it was successful, and you then say, okay, we're ready to get this process started, we're assuming that you issue the debt in the spring of '24. To the extent that you issue the debt later than that, the numbers will, all things being equal, look a little better, but we don't know what interest rates will do and other things related to inflation. But just in your heads, FY '24, spring of '24. 3 scenarios. The first is we're only going to follow the model that I just walked through. Just the primary being that local transfer, that 4.3 million plus those other couple of streams that eventually go away. And then we're going to add to that the equivalent of 1 penny on the tax rate beginning in FY '25, not '24, the budget you're working on, but in FY '25. And a penny, we're assuming, is worth about $580,000. So we're going to start with just that baseline transfer, and then we're going to solve for, well, you got that, what is that leverage? And then scenario 2 is the baseline plus 1 penny. Scenario 3 is baseline plus 2 pennies, just so you have some perspective. You'll see that the payments begin interest in FY '25. We've assumed principal begins in FY '27, and we've got a 20-year term. You could go 30 years, you could go 15, 20 is where we landed. And certainly as things evolve, you want to see other scenarios, we can provide that. And then we looked at 3 different interest rates, 4.5%, 5%, and 5.5%. You know, today, if you were in the market, let's call it 3.75 to 4%. 4% is probably a good number. So 4.5 and 5 have cushion in it, but we are a year out, and we just don't know where rates will be a year from now. The rates are up and down and trading on lots of different news, most of which is unpredictable, and so these do have some cushion in them relative to the current market. We have also run another case that tries to deal with that 2025 and 2026 pinch point, and I'll explain that in a moment. We're including there something called capitalized interest, where if you borrow money, in addition to borrowing money for your project, you're also borrowing some money to make the interest for a year or 2 years. So essentially, you're borrowing now. Interest is paid for year 1 and 2 to the lender, but it's paid for from borrowed money. So you're capitalizing the interest, and so you're not making any out-of-pocket payments. And we did that not because it's necessarily a recommendation. It is legal, it's done, but it's a bit out of the ordinary. But it is a way to allow you all to borrow in '24 and get through 2025 and 2026, where this model has very few dollars available to pay. So you'll see that. Let me just see if there's anything else. I think that covers it. Oh, I know. There's a second borrowing that's going to run through all of these scenarios for Botetourt school improvements of a little over $4 million. So you'll see that. All right, so really everything we want to talk about is on this slide.
Maybe just a quick reminder for
Yeah.
the board that no projects have been assigned. Again, there were some hypotheticals. We had the cost from the CIP 5-year plan to do the 1973 wing of Botetourt. Since they had it as a year 5, we proposed having it as a later borrowing because it gives more ability. So that's why that specific project. anything could be done later or earlier, but that's why that was done that way.
Okay, and maybe, is it me? Can I scroll up a little bit, or Trish, are you able to? That gets us there, great. All right, so get you oriented. I guess you're looking on your screens, but let's look at column B, this scenario 1, and remember the funding in the model, the big dollar amount is that 4.3 million. We are not supplementing it with a 1 penny or 2 pennies. Scenario 2 is where we bring in additional penny worth of revenue in 25. That's at 582,000. And scenario 3 on the far right is where we bring in the equivalent of 2 pennies. Obviously, that would be a decision you all would make to say, hey, we want to do more than what we're showing that we can do, so we're willing to bring more revenue into the model. All right, so you go beneath that and you start on line 7, and essentially what you're going to look at under each scenario column, B, C, and D, you're going to see dollar amounts that you could borrow in FY24. So scenario 1 with a 4.5% interest rate, that will allow you to borrow 15.8 million. You see that?
Additional debt we can take on.
That's the additional debt you could take on. You could go out and borrow, I'm going to round up, $16 million for whatever the purpose might be, and it works within that model. There's no additional revenue needed to make that work. It works within the confines of that slide I went through earlier. And let me just, I might work from left to right. That exact same case, but adding 1 penny of additional revenue beginning in FY25 takes you up to about 26.9 million, right? So that, you can start to see that really starts to sort of accelerate the capacity or the affordability. The far right, 2 pennies kicks it up to 35 million. Then you go to the 5% cases, right? It's just a difference in interest rate. And this first line is the one that's the most traditional. It gets you 14 million versus 25.5 versus 33. This case, where we do this capitalized interest, we are adding to the borrowing amount money to pay interest for the first 2 years. And Ben, I think these are what's left for the project, right? After that money comes out. And you can see for any one of these cases that does sort of squeeze out a little more capacity than the case where you don't capitalize interest. And again, it's just a tool that you could decide to use if, for example, scenario 1 was your preferred choice and you said, you know, 14 is nice, but it sure would be nice to get 21 million for projects. That's a way you could do it. And then finally, at a higher rate at 5.5%, you can see we curtail the amount available, or the capacity. You then add in every case, the $4 million estimate that we're working with for Botetourt, and you get to these grand totals down here. So it's essentially the new debt without Botetourt plus the Botetourt. This kind of gives you the total affordability that you can take on either with just the local transfer plus 1 penny plus 2. And importantly, this gets to the capacity down in the very bottom section. You have policies, 3 debt policies in particular, that talk about the pace with which you're repaying principal. You want to demonstrate that you're paying at least 50% of your principal back in a 10-year period. You want to show also that your debt to assessed value is not greater than 3%. Debt outstanding is a percent of your total tax base. And then debt service, annual payment to your budget, not greater than 15. All 3 of these scenarios work within those policies, with the exception of scenario 3, where that payout ratio dips below 50% for about a year. It was very close, but technically, based on our projections, that policy might be out of compliance for a year. So I would say, on balance, all of these scenarios fit within your policies, and They all cash flow, with the caveat again being that scenario 2 and scenario 3, you have to identify those additional dollars to pull in. So I give you a minute to digest that because I know it's a lot, but I think that was the goal, to try to give you an order of magnitude of what is possible, and what the projects end up being. I think maybe some of you have that in your head, or others are thinking about it, but that's not our goal here tonight, is not to fund any particular projects, but give you an idea of what you could afford under these assumptions.
Your model assumes one project bought inside school.
That's correct. Yes, it does. That's in every case. Thanks.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes, I'd just like to thank you for giving me something to do over the weekend. This was, I really enjoyed going through these numbers.
Okay, well, good.
Yeah.
Glad you like it. We do too.
That's what accountants do.
Any questions?
When you all are looking, I'm sorry, can I ask a question? When you all are looking at these figures and trying to, looking at those lines, 13, 14, 15, 16, at the total amounts, I did present some options or possibilities to think about. And at that last presentation, the total cost was over 29 million. And there were a couple comments that were made that I think were very relevant. The main one being that I was trying to scale back projects to keep them as conservative as possible, to make sure that, to get to as many things to be funded as possible that the board members have said that they're interested in, or in our CIP. And the comment was made, well, we may need to raise that. So at some point, when the board wants to, if the board wants to look at this, then, to go back to these projects. But I can provide anything if it helps for food for thought for tonight on totals. But that was 29.4 is kind of that minimal thing that I brought up.
Dr. Ward.
Yeah, I didn't look at the weekend, so I was having fun. Okay, so just to break it down very simply, that in column B, that means we can borrow money and it wouldn't mean any tax increase for our taxpayer citizens, correct?
Correct.
But if we wanted to increase the amount borrowed, a penny would give us a lot more, and 2 pennies would even give us more, right?
Correct.
So that would mean a tax increase. So has this model taken into account that over this time frame, we're going to be settling the debt on some other projects, which would give us some additional capital to work with, so that your models don't take into account any of those changes in past debt that we pay off?
They do.
Okay.
When you go back and you look at slide 2, column H, that is the existing debt, and you'll see it is stepping down. So we are capturing that.
Okay.
That's the debt retirement at that point, right?
Correct.
Right. Okay.
So the way we capture it is, we're flat funding the revenue that's coming into this model, and the actual debt is stepping down, which is creating some freed up dollars to be used. So we do have it in there.
I think another important thing to think about is when you get down to the pages behind, if there was a particular one that you liked, if you look at the amount that's available to borrow, that's only a portion of it, because Davenport has built back in that we would be building money back up. So it's not that for 20 years, say for example, if you looked at the 1 cent in column C, the 4.5, that 30.958, that's not all that's raised in that 20 years. You've got that to borrow, but you're also accumulating surplus that helps.
Would you like to look at that slide?
Assuming you don't have any other projects.
Well, that's what helps to do. That's what I'm saying. It's not just like you spend all your money and it's over with. At the same time, you are building for other things that have to be, and they're all different. So
Mr. Cole, question on the slide that you're on. You're saying column H is being used, but is column L, that's going to be our surplus, correct? That'll be money that is not earmarked and not being used to pay whatever
current
loan.
debt.
So this number is going to be increasing, correct?
Which number?
The L.
Right now, L is solving for, it's a number each year, and it's solving for the difference between the revenue you have and the payments you got to make. So it is what it is. It is $1 million in the first year. It's a couple $100,000. Then it's $3 million. It eventually goes up every year, but the first several years it bounces around a little bit, particularly because you have those one-time dollars flowing into the model.
Why don't you turn to and show on page 10? I'm sorry.
Can I finish a
I'm
second?
sorry.
Then, with what I'm seeing here, while I've always said I like this proposal, I have some concern, even at going at this with a no tax increase, that we're only going to be left with a couple $100,000 as surplus those first couple of years. That's to me, that's treading very, very lightly on what we have to look at.
I think that's why they brought up the other option of, it's kind of like if you have your closing cost for a mortgage included in, it's not necessarily something that the board may want to do, but that is the other option. If you look through to one of the examples, you can really follow how that money goes and what you see at the end. So again, you're not spending
right, but
all
my money
57.
versus taxpayer money is quite a bit different in my thinking and the decision making that I make while I'm up here looking at things that I'm going to decide on what the taxpayer can afford and how they're going to afford it.
And I can hear the ice cracking.
Well, I can totally agree. I just want to make sure you all understand that you look through the actual plans that show these, because you'll then see what that reserve is based on that scenario. So you really have to go to the following pages to see how it looks each year.
Yeah, I might suggest maybe it's one of the simpler ones if you all can turn to page 6. So the only difference in this model on page 6 from the one we looked at is, pardon?
Page 6.
Oh, okay.
70, yeah.
It says up in the header 19,868,000, right? This is the case where we said, okay, we're 4.5% interest rate. It's only the local transfer of the debt. We're not bringing in a new penny or two. And column J is the new debt payments that we can afford, column J. That was blank on the prior version, right? And so you'll see it's 700,000, 700,000, million, 3 million, 3 on down the line. What that does is it changes what's going on in L and M, right? L had been positive every year. Now we've got a year where L is to the good $1 million in '24. It was in the prior version, right? And remember, that's looking at column G versus column K.
Right, you're losing money.
6.2 million versus 5.1. So we're $1 million to the good, and we set it over here. The next year, you're $500,000 short, but remember, you got $1 million in this debt reserve, and you use half of it the first year to balance this debt budget.
In the second half of the second year.
The next year, you use the second half. That's why column M goes to 0. So you are supplementing your debt budget for 2 years at $500,000 a year that you saved or accumulated in FY24, and then from there, you got a really good year the next year. It's $1.8 million. Now that is worth noting. It's $1.8 million because we're counting on $2.9 million from the sale of assets, which is not a known event. So there is some risk associated with that. If that sale of that property is delayed a year, or you don't get what was assumed here, that's going to change things. But under the assumption, you're $1.8 million to the good, and that's another year where you bank it, and then we have a couple more years where you use it. So the debt reserve does go to 0 in this scenario, but then it has an opportunity to rebuild if you've got to have discipline to budget it that way every year, right? It sort of becomes its own little budget that you need to make sure you can maintain that 4.3, the 237, the 550-some thousand, and you have those two one-time dollars.
And you don't take on any more projects that would make these numbers worse.
That's right. And this column J is the debt service associated with borrowing that 19.8 million. Now, the reality is, would you do the whole 19.8 million at one shot? Maybe, maybe not. Maybe it's broken into two borrowings or three over 3 years. That would only spread things out. But we wanted to sort of keep it relatively simple and say, okay, let's just do a one-time, moment-in-time assessment of what we can borrow under these scenarios, and that, for this particular case, would be just under 20 million.
Mr. Chriscoe, if we were able to break up the borrowing, would it also remove the deficit that we see those couple of years? More than likely?
It would, if you break it up enough, it could may not go away entirely, but it may be reduced. Depends on what amount you borrow, because you're just paying interest that year.
But then you would be assuming the interest would be still the same, and it could not be, right? Because
well, the interest we're running, in this case, it's based on the borrowing amount at 4.5%. So
Right,
if
so
you
if you
broke it
borrow
up,
2 years later.
yeah, if you broke it up, because remember, all you really have in those 2 years is 200,000. So you would have to have a borrowing whose interest payment was only $200,000 a year, and at 4%, that would be technical term. So this only works if you get that $1 million and you save it and you use it for the next 2 or whatever number of years it might spread out to.
Yeah, you don't want to spend it like drunken sailors, right?
That's right. And again, that absent bringing more revenue into this model, it's really just those first 2 years. Well, it's the second and third year that creates that hump to get over, and beyond that, you're in a little better shape because you have some other step downs in the existing debt. Dr. Orth.
And again, this doesn't take into account any changes in revenue streams from the possibility of our county continuing to grow in terms of taxes. So that's independent of what could be happening outside of the borrowing. That is, sales tax, meals tax, and all that is totally separate. So we could be seeing increases there at the same time as the money that we would get from borrowing.
Yeah, I mean, the revenue sources in this model, we talked about the one-time dollars. Column C and D, those, C is a federal subsidy coming back to you. You'd like to think that's pretty solid, but you never know. D that's pretty solid because that was from a refunding. The real key is the $4.3 million a year. So we aren't growing that, and if your other part of your budgets are doing better or worse, we need $4.3 million a year to make this work.
And if you look at page 10, you'll see that those deficits continue further. Those deficits continue further and higher.
Different scenarios.
Yep.
Yeah, that's right. That's where we are.
The 1 cent real estate tax.
Do another penny of the real estate tax rate. You'll notice that folds in column E. The cases where we say 1 or 2 pennies additional, that's a revenue source that will land in column E, and the column L goes positive, goes negative, kind of back and forth.
And then we're responsible for every time our penny's not worth $582,000.
And that's risky.
So if it comes in and our penny's only worth $450,000, then
That's
we're even worse off
You're
than we
at
are.
risk. You're at risk.
Yep. The model doesn't need a penny; it needs $580,000.
And you're assuming a steady economy that's going great, right? They're predicting a recession by the end of the year in this one instance. So this is the rosy picture in terms of the economy, right? You're assuming the economy is going to continue to perform as well as it is today and not get any worse.
Well, I would say we're assuming the tax base in the county doesn't grow and doesn't shrink.
Okay.
So I don't know if that's good or bad or rosy or not, but it just stays constant.
Mr. Gibson.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you for your presentation. It's very helpful for me to understand these numbers because I was having trouble before the meeting. So my question to you is, I assume Davenport advises other localities, and you've been through this consideration of bonds before. Can you tell us just big picture, has this been provided the locality follows your financial advice? Has this been a successful tool for counties who have major projects that are needed in the county to fund those? And have there been success stories using this technique to fund projects?
Yeah, I absolutely. And I guess by technique, I mean, we're just putting on paper what you're already doing, right? You're already budgeting these dollars. And so we're just simply demonstrating that if you keep budgeting these same dollars every year, the 4-3, and that you have some dollars that could be freed up. Now, when that budget comes, you'll have a decision. We free some dollars up. Should we roll it into the operating budget, right, and fund something there? Should we reduce the tax rate, or should we keep it for the capital plan? And this assumes you keep it for the capital plan, and that allows you to afford some new projects without having to find new revenue, because you don't lose, when your debt goes from 3.7 to 3.2, that's $500,000 you now have that you could do lots of different things with. This assumes you keep it in the capital program, and it helps you afford whatever it is you want to do. So we're just sort of putting on paper what you already do, with that caveat that it is making, and it's an important assumption, that you flat fund, assuming you have a desire to do things that require debt, right, or pay-go, but capital. And so, yes, I think for places that have said, we want to do projects, whatever it is, school, county, what have you, and we need a plan that we can follow and budget against, and we know going in, we don't have to raise taxes, or we're willing to do this for a penny. Nothing more but a penny, and what does that do for us? It gives you something to follow, and we have to revisit it periodically for the reasons we talked about. Is a penny worth $582,000 every year? You may have a time where your reassessment takes place and values go down, in which case a penny's not worth 582, but the model needs 582, so that's where you have to adjust. So it's been successful, I'd like to think, in helping people make decisions, but it's got to be revisited on a regular basis.
My household is just a little different on the way I fiscally conserve my money. When I was getting pay raises, I would use my pay raise to pay down my existing debt as opposed to going out and, let's say, buy a new car. So I kept my debt to asset ratio the same because I didn't want to take on more debt, and I was able to pay off my existing debts faster. This assumes that does the debt to asset ratio change as a result of borrowing this money, assuming what projects we take on, right? The debt to asset ratio will change for the worse, right? Will it not?
Well, I mean, it may go up. Debt to assessed value, debt as a percent of your tax base, for example, as you take on more debt, could go up. Now, that isn't necessarily a bad thing. I mean, this is all premised on we want to do something, and if there aren't capital needs, that's fine. I want to be clear, we're not advocating you need to go and borrow money for a project, trying to provide some guidance that if that is what you want to do, here are some ways you can do it.
Very good presentation, thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cole.
Okay?
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate both of you.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, if there's direction that you would like either us to take or further questions that after you all study this some more, I can tell you on the plus side, I think that our population is going up, and yes, we may hit recessions and things, but we have needs that we're not able to pay for right now, and I think this is a way, not able to produce them as quickly. And I think this is the way to look at it. It is scary. You know, anytime we borrow, it's scary. But the benefits that you get, and if we're trying to have some population growth, not too much population growth, but we're going to have more people coming in and paying taxes, and then they're also going to have more demands, and things like the fire station needs to be addressed. So if it's not this, I'm open to hear any suggestions of ways to handle our capital needs, but I would say, as I've said for 2 years in the last 2 budget cycles, we're not addressing our capital needs in a healthy enough way.
But also our population, you say it's growing, but it's not growing.
We are
it hasn't grown 3% in 10 years, right? We've gone, I remember when I first came on the board, we were at 35,000 people, and today, 8 years, 9 years later, we're at 37,000 people. So we haven't really grown that much.
Yeah, the models that we've seen for growth indicate somewhere between 150 to 200 people a year.
Right. So it's very small compared to our
But that's projected.
neighbors.
We don't know what's going to happen with the reserve.
Correct.
Or any other projects that come along. And
Yeah, I'm sorry, I was going to say, under the current numbers that we have grown by 5%, and we are listed in the category and belong to the FACO committee on fastest growing localities in the state. Even though it's a small number, it's still a higher percentage. So I think there's going to be more pressures. The one thing that I wanted to say, because I'm not, this is a huge decision for you all to make, and I'm not saying, oh, slam dunk, there's a lot to consider. The one that bothers me, the thing that would keep me up at night, is the sale of the land. And if there was a way to not count that into the revenue, and instead know that was going to come in at some point, the sale of the fire department's land, if we didn't have that 2.9 in there and it wasn't needed, then it would be like icing on the cake, because there's always going to be additional things that are needed. I also believe that unless the economy really does tank, we're going to get a lot more than 2.9 for that, and the economic boom that would come from there could be very helpful. But that is the one thing that's unusual about a program like this, is you're including a revenue that may not happen when you expect it, or it may not be as much. It could be it sells for $5 million.
And that doesn't include the Page property either.
Right.
Mr.
Right.
Chair,
It's not including a lot of things.
can I make a suggestion?
Yes.
These were a lot of data thrown at us tonight, and I'd like a little bit of time to let this digest. And I know there's things that you want to discuss, but we have some other important matters tonight, and so the media's not over yet. So I think it would be good to have this type of discussion when we're much more refreshed, and that was a lot of stuff thrown at us, personally.
Is it possible to get an actual printout of this for us? Thank you.
Just a hard copy from the board packet, or?
Just a hard copy of Davenport's presentation? Because I'm looking at it on this, and it's.
Would they be able to give us the actual spreadsheets?
I'll just do it.
Well, they are PDFs. I don't know
that doesn't do anything for me.
I mean, I know, but I'm not. Well, we'll find out.
Okay.
Yeah, I think what you want is something you can play around with numbers.
I've already done it.
I bet you have.
All right, next item is budget adoption. Ms. Steele.
Yay! Let me get back to the right page. Okay, so we have several different resolutions, and the first one does have a typo that we need to have corrected. And that is adopting the budget for FY24, and on the 1, 2, 3, 4th whereas, it says FY 2023, and it should say FY 2024. So if the if and when the board adopts that, it needs to be, it is on page 99. It would need to be approved as amended or corrected.
Do we have any discussion before that on the amendments? I'm just trying to follow the.
Yeah, whatever you all would like to do, any questions you have about the budget, what we've got, is a number of the different documents that you have to pass for the tax rate and all that. But if you want to go back to the budget itself.
Do we need to go to the budget? No. Okay, there's a resolution on page 99 with fourth whereas change to fiscal year 2024.
Okay.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Second.
All right, Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Dr. Orth. Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Hutson.
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Yes.
Okay, passes unanimously.
There's an ordinance on a resolution on page 101, setting the tax levies for fiscal year 2023.
Move to approve.
Ms. Steele?
Mr. Bazzani.
Yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Dr. Orth. Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes.
Motion carries.
All right, there's a resolution on page 103, appropriating funds for fiscal year 2024.
Motion to approve, Mr. Chair.
Ms. Steele?
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Dr. Orth. Mr. Smith. Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani.
Yes.
Okay, there's a resolution on page 107, establishing the rate of personal property tax relief for qualifying vehicles.
So moved.
Second.
Ms. Steele?
Dr. Orth.
Yes.
Mr. Smith.
Yes.
Mr. Hudson.
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe.
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick.
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani.
I hope the hoopties out there are assessed right, but yes.
Mr. Gibson.
Yes.
Motion carries.
Okay, we've got a budget.
Congratulations.
Thank you,
Now,
staff.
Y'all did a great job.
We think
and
we have a
passed-
budget.
Yeah, we think. We think.
We have one, the state doesn't, but we have one.
Next item on the agenda is board appointments. You got Wayne Horsley,
Make a motion to reappoint Mr. Horsley.
all right. History, wait a second, we got a sheet. That's the mass, unless you've got somebody. All right, all in favor? Aye. All right, Mr. Wilmot, County Attorney items.
No, other than offering my apology for voicing my opinion on the R cut, which is really not my bailiwick. I don't have anything else.
What, controlling yourself, or?
That isn't my bailiwick either, nor my forte.
Okay.
I do,
Board-
but thank you for not voting for the R cut.
Boards and commission reports?
Mr. Chair, I'd just like to say that I will make sure that I mention what our board did tonight at the Planning District Commission meeting this month to explain to them we thank them for their efforts, but the citizens and the board decided to take a different action based on community outreach.
Perfect. Anything else? All right, supervisor discussion?
Mr. Chair?
Yes, sir.
Since we have now passed our budget, and I know last year I said that I didn't feel like we did enough work on it, I just want to thank my fellow board members and staff for all the hard work that went into the budget this year. I'm glad it's behind us. Hopefully the state doesn't do too much to us when they finally decide to pass their budget, but I just wanted to thank my board and staff for all their hard work.
And maybe staff won't have to hear my call so much. Okay, next item is a closed meeting. Mr. Wilmot, would you read us in? It's on page 114.
Yes, sir. Whereas the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors desires to discuss a particular subject in closed meeting during the course of its meeting of May 2, 2023, and whereas the nature of the subject is potential disposition of an interest in real property identified as tax map number 45-523A RPC 12425 and tax map 45526 RPC 19689, the former county garage on Route 17 pursuant to Virginia Code Section 2.2-3711A3. Now therefore be it resolved that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors does hereby convene in closed meeting for the purpose herein expressed pursuant to the legal authorities recited.
So moved.
Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth?
We're in closed session. Would you read us back into open session?
Yes, sir. Whereas the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors has completed its discussion in closed meeting and now desires to continue its open meeting. And whereas only public business matters lawfully exempted from open meeting were heard, discussed, or considered during the closed meeting. And the only subjects heard, discussed, or considered in said closed meeting were the matters identified in the resolution by which it was convened. Now therefore be it resolved that the Gloucester County Board of Supervisors does hereby reconvene an open meeting at its meeting of May 2, 2023, and certifies the matters set forth in Virginia Code Section 2.2-3712.
So moved. Second. Ms. Steele, will you poll the board?
Mr. Hutson?
Yes.
Mr. Chriscoe?
Yes.
Mr. Hedrick?
Yes.
Mr. Bazzani?
Yes.
Mr. Gibson?
Yes.
Dr. Orth? Mr. Smith?
Yes.
Chairman, motion to adjourn.
Second.
All in favor? Meeting adjourned.